Chapter 587. Anduin also knew that he could not win against Bolvar. In fact, Bolvar, the noble duke, had always been the first choice to stay in the country when the three of them were not around. There was no doubt about his loyalty. Unfortunately, Bolvar was too inflexible and inflexible. Anduin shrugged. If I could, I would like to bring the entire Storm Knights with me. Tyrrhenus is such a miser. He only gave us a quota of 1,000 people for the military parade. If we go beyond that, we'll have to be responsible for our own rations. Duque looked at the hundreds of knights around him, all of whom were envious of the 20 lucky ones who were about to set off through the portal. It couldn't be helped. Although it was good to save time, the teleportation ability of the portal was limited. The Dalajan had gathered so many pharaoh previously, and only sent 1,000 people to grim battle. They could either follow King Lang's example and set off by ship 20 days in advance, or they could reduce the number of people. Anduin suddenly realized that Duque seemed to have brought a lot of people, and it seemed that they were all going to the victory ceremony. Wait, Duque, how many people can you send to Rotterdam at one time? 20 people, Duque said nonchalantly. As soon as he finished speaking, the faces of the knights behind Lothar, who had already put on their ceremonial robes, immediately sank. Damn it, there were ladies and maids on Duque's side, as well as Gavin, Rad, Casa, and the other knights. There were almost 20 people here. Wouldn't that mean that only Lothar could be brought along? Duque suddenly raised his hand to stop Anduin from asking questions. Don't worry, I've recently gained a few new followers who are very good. After saying that, Duque snapped his fingers, and a cold humph appeared in the void. Humph. It was just a humph, but it actually made the experienced knights feel alarmed. More than one of them instinctively put their hands on the hilt of their swords, even if they were just for decoration. Suddenly, in an empty space not far from Duque, a portal glowing with blue and white light opened, and 4 people walked out of it. This is Lady Legolas, Duque said as he pointed at a red-haired female knight with an impressive bust that almost broke the Stormwind uniform. Hi! The greeting of this tall and voluptuous lady caused a commotion among the knights. Duque pointed to the second person. It was a petite elven lady who wore an emerald green ranger outfit that revealed her sexy belly button. But strangely, she didn't have a bow on her back, nor did she have a weapon on her waist. Moreover, her eyes were closed from beginning to end. This is Miss Sarah. Actually she's a druid. Hello everyone. I'm Sala. Her weak voice made the knights want to protect her. There was another commotion. The third was a bronze-skinned male elf with a single ponytail and a single shoulder exposed. He was dressed like a warrior. He stood there in a daze as soon as he came out, as if thinking about life. The fourth was a fellow who wore a wizard's robe and looked like the legendary night elves. The cold humph had come from his mouth. Duque skipped the third person and directly introduced the fourth. This is the Radiant Moon Archmage Dogsh *T.O. Goss. He has a bad temper, please don't take it to heart. The pharaoh named Goss did not notice anything fishy about Duque either. He nodded as a greeting and ignored the others. Nobody knew where Duque had found these weirdos, but one thing was certain. These 4 fellows were definitely not simple. Everyone present was a brave warrior who had experienced hundreds of battles, but when faced with these 4 fellows, especially the 2 men at the back, they all felt a little apprehensive. Lothar dared to swear that he had never felt this way before, even when facing the tribe's monsters called goblins that were taller and scarier than the ogres. Be it the passionate Legolas, the gentle and pleasant Sala, or the 2 fierce-looking male elves, they all gave Lothar a sense of extreme danger. Duque, wait. Let's talk in private. Anduin pulled Duque aside and was about to speak. Anduin, I know what you want to ask, but I can't answer you now. However, I can swear on my life and honor that they will never harm Stormwind or the Alliance. Although I hate your mysticism, it's the same for you and Medivh. Lang and I have long learned to get used to it, Lothar said with his hands on his hips, looking helpless. Seeing that Lothar was a man, but he looked like a wife who had been wronged, Duque burst into laughter. Don't complain. At most, I'll let all your men go to Rotterdam to show their faces. At this moment countless pairs of ears perked up. The humans of Azeroth were founded on the spirit of chivalry, and all they talked about was honor. Now that they had won against the tribe and made huge sacrifices, it was not too much for the knights to proudly participate in the victory ceremony, right? Hence, in a sense, it was also part of human nature to show off. Lothar's facial muscles twitched. Damn it, you're causing trouble for me. Before I went, I spent a lot of effort to choose these few representatives. Now, with just a word from you, all the lads are attracted to you. There are about 500 people here. Are you going to bring all of them? Lothar had a loud voice, and his soft voice was not much different from the shouting of ordinary people. As soon as he said that, the eyes of the lads dimmed. Yes, Duque was a morning star mage. How many people could he teleport? So what if there was a radiant moon mage? Duque pursed his lips, looking like he did not care. He turned his head. Hey dogsh *t. How about you do me a favor and teleport these few hundred people to Rotterdam? Goose tilted his head, pretending not to hear him. Hey, can't you even open a portal? Duque said to provoke him. Goss didn't reply. He didn't even recite an incantation. With a wave of his hand, a teleportation portal that was 2 stories tall immediately appeared in front of everyone. The slightly illusory scenery on the other side. Everyone could tell at a glance that it was the snow-white city walls unique to Rotterdam. Ah, someone finally cried out in surprise. But in the next moment Goose stopped. The huge portal was like an illusion and did not exist anymore. Only the magic undulations that lingered on the ground told everyone that it was not a dream. Goose stood with his hands behind his back, as if everyone owed him money, and did not look anyone in the eye. At this moment, the woman called Legolas seemed to be a little angry. Hey, isn't it just something that Duque promised you on my behalf? I'm holding on to it. Why are you making things difficult for Duque? Be good, listen to me. Show some sincerity later, and I'll give you one. This time, Goose immediately admitted defeat. Duque turned and smiled at Lothar and his knights. Gentlemen, go and get ready. We'll gather back in half an hour. Chapter 588. Located on the northern shore of Lordaeron Lake, the giant white city of Lordaeron was undoubtedly a very beautiful city. It was still a distance away from the Alterac Mountains. Looking from the west to the east, Rotterdam looked like a typical city with mountains on one side and water on the other. In the distance was a snow-capped mountain. On the right was a clear lake that would not freeze in winter, and on the left was a vast grassland. The atmosphere of the triumphant ceremony had already spread throughout the entire city. Since it hadn't truly been invaded, the few destroyed buildings had long since been perfectly repaired. There were colorful flags and beautiful ornaments that the Rotterdam Kingdom had collected from all over the place. Not a single beggar could be seen on the street. These days, even when they were shopping, people were dressed in festive costumes. The people of Lordaeron regarded it as a disgrace to wear the same outfit for 2 days in a row. Due to the arrival of the dignitaries from various countries, as well as the gathering of a large number of high-ranking officers, the lingua franca with different accents could be heard everywhere in Rotterdam City. At the teleportation portal in the north of the city, the mages of the Rotterdam Kingdom, who were in charge of the teleportation portal, were a little bored. I heard that we'll only be busiest on the day of the victory ceremony. Why? The Dalajan academic mages are not willing to waste a few days dealing with the nobles. They think it will reduce their time for experiments. Where's Master Antonidas? He and a few Kirin Tor counselors have already arrived. Where are the elves with their noses in the sky? We're here too. Then there shouldn't be any big shots, right? No, I heard that Sir Duke Marcus and Sir Lothar haven't arrived yet. Just as the 2 earth magicians on duty were chatting, one of them suddenly changed his expression. Wait, there is a teleportation request. Isn't it just a request? Where is it? Let me take a look. The mage came over. No problem. A teleportation request from Stormwind City. The password is correct, just open it. The first mage looked like he was about to cry. No, look at the mana required. My king of magic. Isn't Stormwind Sir Marcus the only one who can teleport? How could there be so much demand? There's a team of 100 radiant moon magi? What should we do? Let's open a small one first. Let them send someone over to confirm. Wait. Our magic array. Oh no, it opened by itself. While the mages of the Rotterdam Kingdom were in a frenzy, they were horrified to find that the magic crystal, which was supposed to release mana after they activated it, ignored their control and poured mana into the portal on its own. The valuable magic crystal dimmed at an alarming rate. Then, right in front of the group of Rotterdam mages, a huge teleportation portal opened on its own. If this were a time of war, this would be considered an invasion. A portal that was even larger and rounder than the one the Dalajan used to send a 1,000-man assault team was opened. For a moment, the mages of the Rotterdam raised their staffs and prepared to fight. However, the two Stormwind Knights that came out of the portal looked at each other in their most perfect posture and announced their names according to international etiquette. The Supreme Commander of the Lordaeron Alliance, His Excellency Anduin Lothar, and Deputy Commander Duke Marcus have arrived. Impeccable etiquette officer, impeccable military posture. Just as more than 20 mages and hundreds of Rotterdam Kingdom's guards rushed over after hearing the news, 2 rows of tall horses came out in a single file. The Stormwind Royal Knights in formal attire spread out to the left and right as soon as they came out. They straightened their backs and unsheathed their swords. The tip of their swords faced the sky, and their palms faced the lower abdomen, allowing the light swords to flash between their eyebrows. Yes, the standard appearance of a big shot. There seemed to be nothing wrong with it. However, every mage of the Rotterdam Kingdom felt as if they were going to spit blood on the wall. F***ck. Which bastard is so extravagant to teleport horses here? Is your magic mentor a part-time warrior? Did anyone ever tell you that it takes 3 times as much mana to teleport a horse as it does to an adult? Even if the Stormwind Kingdom has money, don't drag the Rotterdam Kingdom down with you. The mages who were guarding the teleportation portal really had the urge to curse in front of everyone. That's right. According to the teleportation agreement, the mana required to open the teleportation portal was split equally between the 2 sides. This was to increase the stability of the teleportation portal and make it fairer. However, the amount of magical crystals consumed just now was equivalent to a year's worth of Rotterdam Kingdom's North Array. If it weren't for Lothar and Marcus, who had a terrifying background, the captain of the mages would probably have run up and scolded him. Lothar, who was riding a horse, appeared. While letting the horse move forward slowly, Lothar said to Duque, "Your follower is really impressive. He can teleport so accurately from such a long distance, and it doesn't feel shaky at all. I still remember the first time Mediv played with teleportation. I vomited yesterday's dinner when he asked me to try it." Due to the fact that it was Storm who opened the teleportation portal on their own, the etiquette officer of the Rotterdam Kingdom ran over in a panic and said a bunch of welcoming words. However, Lothar noticed that the mages of the Rotterdam Kingdom looked as if their parents had died. "What's wrong with them?" Lothar asked Duque softly. "No, I guess they're heartbroken, because the teleportation portal cost them too many magical crystals." Duque pursed his lips, and then opened his palm. As if dismissing a beggar, he threw out a large pile of magical crystals from his storage bag. "I've just used up the magic crystals of the Rotterdam Kingdom. I'm sorry, these are for you. If there's more, just take it as a tip." Do you think the people of the Rotterdam Kingdom are poor people who have never seen the world? The leader of the mages didn't even bother to pick them up at first. In the next second, he suddenly gasped and stared at the magical crystals that Duque had thrown on the ground, unable to move his eyes away. In this era, the magical red jade could store the most magic power. However, the magic power contained in the items that Duque had thrown out was clearly far beyond the standard that the magical red jade should have. Such highly concentrated crystals could not be produced at all, and could only be found in ancient ruins. The official name was unknown, but the mages liked to call it arcane light. Such an item was simply priceless in the market, and any one of them would be enough for a radiant moon mage to help. Now Duque actually threw out dozens of them casually. Damn it, how rich is this Duke Marcus? The leader of the mages, who had been pretending to be aloof just now, suddenly pounced on those magical crystals like a dog. He was not the only one. The other mages also pounced on them without any manners at all. That scene made Lothar's eyelids twitch. He suddenly had a feeling that Duque seemed to have come this time to cause trouble. Chapter 589. Ignoring the shouting mages. Duque and the rest went to the state guest house in the west of the city, after passing through a huge inner city gate. For safety's sake, the area with the teleportation portal could not be in the same area as where the politicians stayed. At this time, the mages of the Rotterdam Kingdom came to their senses. What the hell? How many people did Stormwind use the teleportation portal to come here? There should be hundreds of people here, right? Not only were the people of Rotterdam confused, but even King Lang, who came to welcome Anduin, was confused. Didn't they say that in order to save money, every gold coin would be used to restore the country? Why did hundreds of knights suddenly come here? Where did the warhorses come from? After all, warhorses were not marine creatures. If they were tossed around on the sea for 10 days to half a month, they would either die or be half dead. Warhorses were often sickly when they disembarked from the ship. What was going on with these 300 tall horses that were brimming with energy? You all came here using the teleportation portal? Not to mention Lang. Even the Radiant Moon Court mage behind Lang had his mouth wide open. He could clearly see that there were 2 black decayed teeth. Anduin pursed his lips at Duque, and Lang immediately understood. Duque was causing trouble again. Duque touched the back of his head. Sorry, Lang, I didn't tell you beforehand. The situation is a little complicated this time. In any case, teleporting so many people and horses at once might only happen once in a few years. They even arranged transportation? Where did this mage god come from? Lang easily noticed the 4 discordant existences in the team. It couldn't be helped. These guys were too conspicuous. The whole team seemed to take a detour when they saw them. While entering the state guest house with Duque, Lang said, Duque, this victory ceremony is too big. You have to tell me, what's going on with them? After entering and closing the door to ensure that no one was eavesdropping, Duque told Lang and Anduin the answer. Several seconds later, the 2 big shots of Stormwind were so shocked that they were unable to say anything for a long time. At the same time, in the main hall of the Rotterdam Kingdom, several kings were holding a salon. Thank you again for your hospitality, Your Majesty. The one who spoke was a tall, black-haired noble. His voice was deep and powerful. Defeating those evil and filthy orcs is your greatest achievement as the leader of the Rotterdam Alliance. We should do something to prevent the remaining traitors from invading our pure alliance. If we succeed, King Tyrrhenus, who was dressed in an elegant gold and white robe, nodded slowly. Lordaeron and the Alliance will remember you, Lord Presto. Through your analysis and absolute evidence, I believe Gilnis and Stromgard have more or less understood the current situation. The elder Xeon Greymane nodded readily. Salas Trollbane, who was in the prime of his life, rubbed his forehead. He seemed to be having a headache over Tyrrhena's words, but in the end, he still nodded in agreement. Thank you for your understanding, Your Majesties. King Tyrrhenus himself was not short, but Presto's obviously much taller physique still gave him a sense of pressure. The Lord of Presto smiled, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. The 3 kings present were clearly the cream of the crop, dragons and phoenixes among men. But in front of this Lord of Presto, it was obvious that he had the aura of a king more than the 3 of them. This was truly a surprising thing. Presto's short black hair shone neatly, and he was clean-shaven. His thin face had the appearance of an eagle, which attracted the attention of many women in the palace. He gave off the feeling that he was more noble than any of the princes. No, it should be said that the 3 kings in front of him were more like country bumpkins. He came to Lordaeron before the Battle of Steel Stove Fort. Presto's perfect etiquette and elegant temperament first won the hearts of the upper class of Lordaeron. When King Janiers returned to Lordaeron on his griffin, even the picky King Xeon showed a rare smile. A few months ago, Presto was still an unknown young noble, but now, he had become an influential figure. His political views made all the high nobles in the northern continent feel as if they had eaten 1,000-year-old ginseng fruit. All the pores on their bodies felt refreshed. Look at this. First of all, since this was the Lordaeron Alliance, the victory ceremony must be held in the capital of Lordaeron. Otherwise, it would be blasphemy to the entire alliance. Every country in the alliance must send troops to participate in the victory ceremony. The number and type of troops will be decided by King Tyrrhenus. Every noble of Lordaeron was grinning from ear to ear at this point. Similarly, the surrender ceremony must also be held in Lordaeron. All the captives must be brought to Lordaeron for a parade, before being distributed by Lordaeron. In fact, the people of Lordaeron can pick the strongest ones, and use them to hold a grand gladiatorial tournament to attract spectators, and earn back their money. The stronger ones will be thrown into the mines, and the weaker ones will be thrown to the allies. Especially Great Chief Orgrim, who had to personally kneel in front of King Tyrrhenus. All the warships of the Horde will be confiscated and distributed to Gilneas and Lordaeron, according to the ratio of troops they sent out. Although the warships of the Horde looked poorly decorated, the strong keels and sturdy decks will definitely increase the standard of the navies of the two countries by 3 levels. Cuel Salus will continue to send out the rangers to help Lordaeron clear out the remaining orcs in the Tirisful woodlands. Other than that, there were also other minor conditions. The reality now is that almost all of the 11 countries in the alliance had suffered greatly in the war. Even if they wanted to, they would not be able to get anything out of them. However, these measures that did not have much practical meaning could greatly satisfy the vanity of the people of Lordaeron, and even the people of Gilneas and Stormguard. After gaining the trust of the nobles in the north, it was also his suggestion to send the Alterac Eagle Knights, who were eager to clear their name on the battlefield, to transport food before the Black Rock Mountain battle. Those traitors are not trustworthy. Leaving them on the battlefield will only make them a weak spot for the Horde to attack. He once suggested that Tyrrhenus take control of the Alterac army, and then split all the Alterac Knights into the various Lordaeron cavalry regiments. Although Stormguard and the other countries also felt that it was necessary to take control of the Alterac army at the time, but after the war, they felt that they should not continue to exercise unilateral control over the Alterac army. At this time, Presto stood up again and used his glib tongue to give a reasonable explanation for everything. What was even more amazing was that under a coincidence, he found evidence to support his argument. Chapter 590. On this day, King Tyrrhenus Menethil II, who was growing old and fat by the day, made a decision that shocked even himself after careful consideration. This decision was so important that he even ignored the news of Duque's high-profile appearance. No, to be precise, he instinctively refused to listen to any news about Duque. Every time Duque appeared, it was equivalent to stealing the limelight from Lordaeron. After carefully confirming that the cards in his hand were all indestructible, and that Duque would not be able to shake them, Tyrrhenus ignored Duque. For the past 3 days, Duque had been living a comfortable life. As soon as Legolas and the other 3 arrived at the Rotterdam Kingdom, they opened the teleportation portal and left after entering the state guest house. They would not return until the morning of the 25th. The 3 Windrunner sisters were the same. They went to Alterac Mountain to play. Duque, on the other hand, was either bragging to Kale, that's, drinking with Magni Bronzebeard, while talking about high mobility combat, or discussing with Kidron Wildhammer about the Ingerman slalom and the energy theory of aerial combat. These 3 days, Duque basically drank until dawn, then slept soundly, woke up in the afternoon, and then had banquets, dances and cocktail parties. He did not seem to know that in Lordaeron, there was a girl whose fate was bound, staring in the direction of the guest house with a sad expression. 3 nights in a row, nothing happened. On the night of the 24th, the girl once again looked in the direction of Duque. Duque seemed to have drunk too much, and unconsciously walked out of the balcony. He should have been satisfied. But for some reason the girl prayed for more. Prayed that Duque could hear her. Prayed that he could hear her prayers. A miracle happened. A beautiful rose appeared in Duque's hand, as if he was performing a magic trick. It was an ice and snow rose made of pure magic. In the dark, the rose was so crystal clear, so dazzling, but because of the angle between the trees, it could only be seen from the girl's direction. The girl almost doubted her eyes. She rushed into the room and took out a telescope. That's right. That rose, which should have been unique in the world, did not disappear. Duque seemed to have sensed the girl's gaze, and the smile on his face did not disappear. She had been imprisoned, and under the strictest surveillance. She couldn't even send out a note or a magic message. How did he know? No, everything was no longer important. Through the binoculars, she read Duque's lips. Duque only said 2 words, at this moment. Tears suddenly flowed down her beautiful face like a dam that had collapsed. And they flowed down her beautiful face. He remembers. He still remembers. That night, no one else knew about this little episode. In the blink of an eye, it was December 25th. It was a day that the entire alliance would remember. Unfortunately, the grander the day, the more problems there were. Why did you cancel our victorious return formation? We can accept to appear in any position. But what right do you have to revoke our right to participate in the victory ceremony? In the temporary military camp outside the city, General Haas of Alterac couldn't help but roar at the ceremonial officer from Lordaeron, Count Frankie. Behind him was a team of 300 royal guards. Count Frankie didn't mind Haas's anger at all. Your king Eden Pyrenod betrayed the alliance. Alterac is already a disgrace to the alliance. We allowed you to participate in the war, just to let you atone for your crimes and wash away your shame. Now we're holding a victory ceremony to welcome the heroes of the alliance. You sinners have the nerve to stand side by side with the heroes? King Pyrenod is a traitor. We admit it too. But our Eagle Knights, from the beginning of the war to the end, we lost 80% of our people. It's good to be cannon fodder. It's good to charge back at the charging horde. We gritted our teeth and persevered. We thought we've used our achievement points to wash away the shame on us. It was already agreed that we could participate in the ceremony. Why did you suddenly say we can't? Haas's chest rose and fell rapidly. His weather-beaten cheeks were covered in tears. The quarrel here even alarmed the armies of other countries. What happened? It seems that Lordaeron suddenly doesn't want Alterac's troops to participate in the victory ceremony. They're already here. Aren't they messing with us? The soldiers of the various countries discussed, but no one dared to step forward. After all, it was the capital of the Rotterdam Kingdom, which was the strongest among the alliance countries. Today was a big day for the Rotterdam Kingdom. How could they not give the alliance some face in the territory of the alliance? No one knew why the Rotterdam suddenly wanted to target Alterac. Even though everyone sympathized with the troops that had been fighting on the front lines of the alliance, no one dared to stand up for them before they could figure out the situation. At this time, 2 unexpected big shots appeared. The Alliance Commander Anduin Lothar, the Alliance Deputy Commander Duke Marcus. The 2 actually came together. What happened? Lothar's trademark loud voice was very suitable for calming the situation. General Haas's first reaction was joy, but in the next moment, his expression darkened again. The Alliance army had been disbanded, and the armies now belonged to each country. They were just formally under the banner of the Alliance. Were Lothar's words still useful? To be honest, after hearing Count Frankie's words, Lothar frowned deeply. This matter was not easy to handle. They were allies after all. To be honest, everyone had contributed to the fight against the orcs and shed blood. Why make things difficult for Alterac at this time? No matter how slow Lothar was, he instinctively smelled the smell of a political conspiracy. General Haas, Duque suddenly said, "Did you bring the armor you used before? I'm not talking about those things that are just for show." Haas quivered. He suddenly realized what Duke wanted to do. His voice trembled as he said, "Yes, yes, of course. Those are our real merits." "Yes, scars were the merits of a man," Duque said in a deep voice. "Put them on. We, the Knights of Stormwind, will wear them too." Haas couldn't believe his ears. He couldn't help but subconsciously look at Count Frankie of Rotterdam. Count Frankie screamed on the spot, and raised an extremely exquisite scroll in his hand. "Duke Marcus, what do you want?" This was a direct order from His Majesty Tyrrhena's Menethil II, and the order was here. It's not only an order from the King of Rotterdam, but also the leader of the Rotterdam Alliance. Chapter 591. Hiss! As the sound faded, the surroundings became deathly silent. Tyrrhena's was trying to force the Alterac people into a dead end. Wasn't it just because Alterac made a mistake and let the horde in? Lordaeron did not fall in the end. Was there a need to hold such a grudge? To be honest, everyone felt that King Prianod's betrayal was very shameful. In the beginning, everyone also felt that the Alterac Eagle Knights were shameless. But how did they do it? Withstanding the endless humiliation from the alliance, they charged at the front and retreated at the back. Many times they were completely crippled. But what happened? How many times did the 1,000 knights fight? And half of them died. When the knights died, the knight candidates took over. When the candidates died, the apprentices took over. Using the weapons left by their predecessors, they hammered the curved armor piece by piece before using it again. They had already washed away the humiliation with blood and bravery. Anyone who had a little understanding of the Eagle Knights would not look down on this iron-blooded army. Now, with a single order from Tyrrhenas, they had been eliminated. How could they accept this? Duque had made a name for himself. But now that the Alliance army had been disbanded, Duque was just a Grand Duke. As a lord of the southern continent, did he have to offend the strongest king in the northern continent? Daneth Trollbane peeked at Duque's ridiculously young face. He should not have had any hope, but he was still a little expectant. Muradin Bronzebeard and Kidron Wildhammer took a step forward, but were pulled back by Magni Bronzebeard, one in each hand. He is Duque. It was very simple, he was Duque. That magical Duque. Since the alliance was formed, he had created countless miracles, and had been coordinating with almost every deputy commander of the alliance. If Duque really did not do anything, then his title of miracles would cry. That was what everyone thought, and that was what they all hoped for. At this time Duque smiled. His voice suddenly became loud and clear. Today is the Alliance's victory celebration. Today was not Lordaeron's victory celebration. You're just a dog that has never been on a battlefield and barks without the leash Tyrrhenas gave you. If you can understand human language, then get lost. Or I'll make you get lost. As his words fell, the entire world was shocked. How dare Duque? Duque really dared to do that. Almost every Alliance warrior who witnessed this scene stared at Duque with bulging eyes. The blood in his chest suddenly surged to the extreme. They didn't even dare to breathe, afraid that they would miss this historic moment. Duke Frankie was like a dog whose tail had been stepped on. He almost jumped up. Duke Marcus, you're just a duke. How dare you disobey His Majesty Tyrrhenas Menethil II's order? Are you done? Duque smiled and gestured to Lothar not to stop him. Lothar lowered his head and held his forehead. All right, I hope you really know what you're doing. The next moment, there was a loud slap. A hard slap landed on Count Frankie's oily face. It was called lightning, but that was only relatively speaking. Duque's attack was in slow motion to the warriors present. Duque was slow, but Frankie was even worse. It was like a snail being robbed by a tortoise and then reporting. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. He was too fast. Alright, that was just a lame joke. What everyone was more concerned about was that Duque hit him. Duque actually slapped Frankie while he was holding Tyrrhena's order. The slap made the oily guy's mouth crooked. You dare hit me? Count Frankie covered his face like a little wife who had just been bullied. His eyes widened in disbelief. And for the first time, there was an emotion called fear on his arrogant face. Without giving him time to react, he slapped him again with the back of his hand. Slap. This slap was even heavier, causing him to see stars. He actually spun around and fell on but on the snow-covered ground. His luxurious purple pants looked like they were stained with a pile of **T. What are you doing? Only then did the captain of the Imperial Guards behind Count Frankie react, and he suddenly pulled out his sword from his waist. After all, he was originally sent here by Tyrrhenas to hold down the fort, to suppress the disobedience of the other countries. Now, right in front of him, his messenger was slapped, and he was slapped twice when he showed the king's order. How could Rotterdam hide its face? Get lost! Duque shouted. With the help of magic amplification, a loud voice exploded in the joint army camp like thunder. Along with this roar, hundreds of hands of magic suddenly appeared out of thin air. After just a second and a half of casting, the same number of arcane shock, as the hands of magic suddenly blasted on the chest of the soldiers of the Rotterdam Royal Guards. 300 people were sent flying at the same time. It was a spectacular scene. Donna's Trollbane opened his mouth wide in astonishment. The Bronzebeard brothers and Kudrin raised their war hammers high. The Knights of Stormwind and Alterac hit the shields with their swords. The dwarves hit the shields with their war hammers and cheered loudly. The elves whistled at the rangers. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of Alliance soldiers, the 300 people were all sent flying for a few meters, and they fell on their butts. All of them were dizzy from the fall. Before they could get up, Duque's next attack arrived. Slap! 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 A mage's hand appeared on the collar of each royal guard's breastplate. This kind of mage's hand lifted him up with one hand, and then the other mage's hand quickly followed up and slapped him. A slap in the front hand, a slap in the back hand. A slap in the front hand, a slap in the back hand. A slap in the front hand, a slap in the back hand. Back and forth. These arrogant people who only had eyes for Tarinas and did not care about the politicians of the various countries were slapped hard again and again. How many slaps were slapped? No one could count. Anyway, they were all handsome and good-looking, and all of them were slapped swollen by these hands of magic that suddenly came out of nowhere. Well, a team of male model-level Imperial Guards could now be renamed as the Pighead Army. It wasn't that no army of Lordaeron discovered this, and Abendis was the one who rushed over. But even he was shocked. He didn't expect that Duque would dare to turn against him like this. But the glory of the country. Just as Abendis was about to do something, he suddenly felt an extremely terrifying pressure. The endless pressure made him feel like a frog being targeted by a giant poisonous snake. He had no way to resist at all. To die or not to die, it all depended on the mood of the existence that seemed to be at the top of the food chain. Abendis's back was instantly drenched in sweat. In front of him, Duque flipped over and got on his horse. He raised the Grand Marshal's staff high up and shouted to the sky, "Today, this is the Alliance's victory ceremony. Anyone who killed orcs for the Alliance, anyone who has shed blood for humans, dwarves, and elves is qualified to participate. This has nothing to do with national boundaries, only fairness and justice. If you are a man, come with me. If the people of Lordaeron don't give you glory, I, the Vice Commander of the Alliance, will. Let's go." Chapter 592. They used to think that mages were cowards who only knew how to hide in the safe areas behind the warriors who were fighting in the front. Hence, in the hearts of most of the Alliance soldiers, no matter how good Duque's strategy was, or how good his internal affairs and logistics abilities were, he would always be the deputy commander of the Alliance. The real commander was still Anduin Lothar, who dared to charge to the front line and fight the orcs. No one felt that there was anything wrong with that impression of Duque. Today, Duque used his actions to subvert that impression. It was not right to say that it was subverting. It should be a more exaggerated sublimation. Seeing this scene, every soldier suddenly felt a fire burning in their hearts. Without comparison, there would be no contrast. They were all killing enemies for the Alliance, who didn't want to return home in glory and enjoy the cheers and praises of the people after the war. For the soldiers of other countries, returning triumphantly in Rotterdam City was completely different from returning triumphantly in their own capital. Alright, Rotterdam was the leader of the Alliance. They had just finished the final battle at the Dark Portal, and they had crossed the entire Eastern Kingdom from the southernmost tip to the northernmost tip. They were rushing with all their might, and they were marching almost every day. Well, when they finally arrived, they found that everything was a waste, be it supplies or camp. The Allies ate black bread made from moldy millet. It was thick and hard, and it could be used as a stick to beat people up. Even the auxiliary soldiers of the Rotterdam ate white bread that tasted good. It was freezing cold, and the Allied soldiers who rushed over had no supplies. The Alliance soldiers here had to report several times to get a set of linen clothes. They were shivering from the cold. The people of the Rotterdam could get their own cotton clothes. They were treated differently. The people of the Rotterdam acted like they were the best in the world, and their attitudes were actually just one sentence. Without the support of the Rotterdam, you're all a motley crew. Letting you participate in the victory ceremony is a gift from the Rotterdam. Hurry up and thank us. Which family had not been bullied before? Who would have thought that they would have to be bullied after coming to the Rotterdam? At this moment, Duque's actions were simply satisfying. From the soul to the heart, the intense flames were boiling in every blood vessel and burning in every cell. Follow him. Follow him. Follow Lord Marcus. Yes, we've all bled for the Alliance. We've all given our lives. Why is there a difference in treatment? Countless swords and spears were raised high into the sky. The blade, which was stained with the blood of the orcs, glowed with a faint red light. Countless shouts converged into a loud sound that exploded in the camp. Duque rode his horse proudly and walked side by side with Anduin towards General Abendis, who was guarding the entrance of the camp. Get out of my way, or I'll step over your dead body. Abendis shuddered. He saw the look in Duque's eyes. Duque was clearly saying, I saved you once, but I can also take back your life. Damn it. Duque was serious. General Abendis was one of the higher-ups, and he knew what King Tyrrhenas was planning. He also felt that his king was a little unkind, but he was still the king that he had sworn to serve for the rest of his life. His body trembled, and his mouth twitched for a long time before he managed to say, Duque, is it worth it? Duque did not answer him directly. He leaned over and whispered into Abendis's ear. If the entire Alterac was destroyed, I would have nothing to say. But now, if the leader of the Alliance can occupy the territory of his allies, then there's no need for such an alliance. His voice was not loud, but it was not soft either. It was enough for Abendis and Lothar to hear. At this moment, Lothar suddenly understood Duque's intention. Duque, I support you. Lothar's loud voice easily caused even louder cheers behind him. At this time, the victory ceremony of Rotterdam City had already begun for an hour. In the first half of the ceremony, it was the most eye-catching ceremony of the captives. 25,000 orcs had their hands tied behind their backs, and they were shackled with iron shackles that weighed at least 50 kilograms. They were then tied up with thick iron chains and strung up in groups of 100. They lowered their heads and walked through the long and wide streets under the gaze of countless people. At first, the orc captives attracted the attention of the citizens. Oh my God! They're too burly. Are our warriors supposed to fight against such monsters? Look at their fangs. They're even more violent than the teeth of a wild boar. Holy light above, our brave warrior actually defeated such an opponent. Soon, after a short period of amazement, it was ushered in a frenzy of anger. Bastard! Give me back my husband. A lady on the balcony on the second floor threw the first rotten tomato at the orcs. Give me back my father. A young child who was about 7 or 8 years old threw the first stone. In just a few seconds, thousands of objects flew out from all corners of the street and poured onto the captives. The citizens could not rush past the 2 lines of city guards on the street, so they could only vent their anger in that way. The Battle of the Dark Gate this time had almost swept through all of Rotterdam's territories, from the Silverpine Forest in the southwest to the holy city of Stratholm in the northeast, and then to the core of Rotterdam City. The heavy loss of human lives was shared equally among almost every family. Even if they were not in mourning, it was more or less the same. Every orc captive had a bloody nose and swollen face, and even their fangs were broken. However, they did not dare to resist, and even roared at the top of their lungs. They just lowered their heads and were escorted through the long street. Among the 25,000 orcs, there was only one who held his head high, Chief Orgrim. His mouth was sealed, and his legs were shackled tightly to a metal plate that weighed 2 tons. His wrists were also shackled tightly, and he was kneeling just like that. However, his head had never been lowered. Behind the cage, there was a sign with the words Chief of the Horde written on it. This caused Orgrim to suffer the most attacks. The stones and rotten tomatoes that were thrown at him almost drowned him to death. Even the soldiers who were wearing heavy armor to prevent themselves from being smashed to death by the citizens' attacks were too violent. In the end, they had no choice but to let the mages blow away the objects around Orgrim. Hang him! Hang him! Hang the chief of the orcs! The angry citizens raised their fists high and let out a monstrous roar. On the main balcony of the palace, King Tyrrhenas and his children, Arthas and Kalia, looked at the scene with satisfaction. After the captive offering ceremony, it was time for the real victory ceremony. Countless handymen, who had long been prepared, quickly rushed out of the alleys of the city with brooms and other things. They cleaned up the debris on the streets with great agility and proficiency. In just 10 minutes, the road from the north gate to the royal palace was cleaned. At this moment, Tarina's expression suddenly froze. It was because he saw through the binoculars that the mountain eagle flag of Altrank followed closely behind the storm lion flag, flying at the north gate of the Rotterdam kingdom. Chapter 593. Tarina's almost spat out a mouthful of blood on the white jade balcony railing. His script was perfect. If he wanted to take over Alterac, he could not make the Alterac people into war heroes. If he let the Eagle Knights attend the ceremony, it would be a hindrance to their next move. That useless Frankie, didn't I give him the order? Tarina's almost wanted to order his men to hang the idiot who did not do his job well. It was too late now. They had already entered the battlefield. Were they supposed to let Mograine chase the Eagle Knights back? But who let them in? What was Abendis doing? Wait, where did the horses in Stormwind come from? Tarina's trembled slightly. The Stormwind Knights had arrived as the first kingdom to fight against the orcs, and also the first kingdom to be destroyed by the brutal horde. The Stormwind Knights were the first victorious team to enter the battlefield, which had a special meaning. This was out of the expectations of the people from Lordaeron and the people from other countries. What they saw was not a knight in shining armor, nor was it a majestic steed with well-groomed hair that was incomparably clean. They saw a large group of warriors who had returned from 100 battles. Even though it had been cleaned, bloodstains could still be seen on the armor. It was full of uneven marks, and there were even cracks caused by heavy weapons. Only a new piece of metal was embedded on it like a patch. Some of the knights' shields had obvious holes. That was the result of the troll throwing their spears. The sword was still sharp when it was pulled out, but upon closer inspection, one could see the unevenness on the blade. Those were the marks of the sword being polished again. The Alterac Eagle Knights were almost the same. What was more special was that many of them carried more than one sword, and many of them were broken. A qualified knight's sword was worth a lot of money. Normal steel swords cost at least 3 digits. So the tradition of knights was that when an older knight thought that an apprentice was qualified enough to be a knight, he would give a knight's sword to the apprentice. This was a legacy, and also a promise from the older generation to the younger generation. A knight was only allowed to have one sword at a time. There was only one circumstance in which a knight was allowed to carry multiple swords. That was, when he returned from the battlefield, he could bring back the swords of his elder or comrade who had died in battle. The long sword was the knight's tombstone, and also the knight's epitaph. The blood-stained swords that were even broken into two completely announced the fate and will of their owners to every audience. Countless people from the Rotterdam kingdom gasped. The kind-hearted girls sobbed uncontrollably. They had heard of the betrayal of the Alterac king, and they had publicly insulted the Alterac people countless times. But they had never thought about how much the Alterac knights had sacrificed in order to wash away this shame. Behind them were the Storm Guardians from Riptide Fortress. They carried the shields of their fallen comrades, and those charred shields told of the Red Dragon, who had still belonged to the Horde at that time, and how powerful his attacks had been. The Dalajan raised the broken tower shields and hand crossbows. The Kul Tiras carried a row of broken scimitars. There were many, many more. The warriors of the Alliance used the truest way to show the cruelty of war and the greatness of the warriors to the people who had stayed behind. There were no loud slogans and no triumphant expressions. The troops of the various countries advanced in silence. Perhaps an hour ago, the people who had not experienced the cruelty of war did not understand how the seemingly weak humans could defeat the ferocious beastmen. Now they all understood. That was what the warriors of the Alliance had exchanged with their blood and lives. They had fought for it with their greatest courage and the firmest will. No one knew who was the first to clap. No one knew who was the first to cheer. On both sides of the silent road, cheers suddenly rose to the sky. Warriors, good job. Thank you for fighting. Without you we would all die. You are the true heroes of the alliance. I love you. I want to marry you. Whose tears were flying? Whose heart was trembling? Whose throat was it that was roaring? When the applause, cheers, and shouts swept towards the victorious warriors, every warrior of the alliance could not help but tear up. At this moment, their hardships and the sacrifice of their comrades suddenly felt that it was worth it. Long live the alliance! Long live the warriors! The sun shone on the warriors' not-so-bright armor. Each armor seemed to be burning with raging flames. An indescribable brilliance rose from the warriors' bodies. Even the radiance of the sun could not cover such a bright light. It was a radiance that came from the soul. It was a radiance that symbolized courage, so much so that everyone could not bear to look away from these warriors. At this moment, the onlookers also gave the warmest cheers to the dwarves and high elves. Suddenly, the Rotterdam army, which was supposed to be the finale, appeared. Very strangely, countless people stopped what they were doing. There was no applause, no cheers, no rain of petals falling from the sky. Even the people of Rotterdam stared at the army of their country in disbelief. After seeing such a realistic, triumphant team that was so close to the war, the white horses that were so gorgeous that they looked like they were participating in a dressage competition, the pieces of brand new armor that were so shiny that they could be reflected in a mirror, and the light and gorgeous rapiers that were hung on the waists of the knights. Almost everything was deeply stimulating people's eyes. In an instant, everyone felt a burning pain coming from their eyes, piercing straight from the depths of their eye sockets to the depths of their hearts. If they did not see the allied army led by Duque and Anduin, perhaps they would applaud these seemingly gorgeous and mighty things, and the girls would scream at the handsome knights. But now, everyone felt that the last appearance of the Rotterdam Knights was simply a blasphemy to this tragic and unparalleled war. The people of the Rotterdam Kingdom felt that they had been fooled and humiliated, especially when they saw the young nobles who were ignorant and incompetent, and could barely ride their horses, sneaking into the victorious return team. Get out! This is the festival of the warriors. Yes, get out! The Rotterdam does not need trash like you who pretend to have military merits. Get out! Get out! Get out! Tens of thousands of voices converged together, and soon, everyone consciously adjusted the rhythm of their roars. Get out! Get out! Get out! The roars were like the raging waves of the sea. The curses were earth-shattering. At this moment, Tarina's face lost all color. Chapter 594. What kind of hatred and resentment was there for the people of their own country to oppose the army of their own country? For a long time, the nobles of Lordaeron had lived a luxurious life, and had long forgotten the voice of the people. To them, the people were just wheat that would automatically grow every year. They had all kinds of responsibilities and obligations. They had to pay taxes to the nobles, provide labor for the nobles, and provide soldiers when the country was in danger. After more than 2,000 years of peace, the nobles had long forgotten that their ancestor was a warrior conferred by Emperor Saladin. This warrior's name was Lordan, and this warrior's son was called Menethil. Later on, Menethil named the land Thoradin the Great as Lordaeron, and Menethil became the royal family's surname. In that era where clans were the dominant force and there were no surnames, this was already a pioneering move. Suddenly being opposed by the seemingly docile people, not only Tarina's, but all the Lordaeron nobles around him were embarrassed. This is a pity, Zeon Greymane said. Jean Greyman said, it seems that someone down there has mistaken the difference between a triumphant return and a grand parade. Of course, Tarina's did not know that this proud and aloof King Gilneas, who seemed like a standard politician, would one day become the most reliable ally of the alliance. He only knew that Zeon was taking advantage of the situation. That's right. After Lord Presto appeared and presented the evidence, Zeon secretly offered to support a nephew of Presto. Zeon secretly offered to support a so-called nephew of Prianod's, who could not have been more distant. But Tarina's rejected him cruelly. Now, everything was different. Looking at Anduin Lothar and Duke Marcus at the front of the victorious team, Tarina's knew that all of this had something to do with them. If he did not do anything, it would not look good during the throne meeting. even if he forcefully passed the resolution. I'm getting old. I want to rest before the triumphant return to the palace. Why don't we all rest in the side hall? Everyone knew that Tyrrhenas could stand from dawn to dusk if the situation was favorable. Now that he suggested it, everyone knew that this was another round of quick and urgent political transactions. As the representative of Cuel Salis, Prince Kale, that's understood that this was a political game in the human world, and had nothing to do with the elves. He was the one who truly rested. Lang and Dallin looked at each other, and saw the worry in each other's eyes. Now that Tyrrhenas was taking advantage of his old age, he could not allow the old king to rest, could he? Lang and the other two nodded quietly to each other. They were going to meet up later. All of a sudden, the balcony of the palace that was more than 100 square meters became empty. Not a single king was paying attention to the victorious procession that would begin to arrive at the square in front of the palace in 20 minutes. In the side palace, Tyrrhenas pushed open the huge golden door. The magnificent murals on the wall had always been his greatest pride and joy. Unfortunately, he was not in the mood to appreciate them now. The first to meet was naturally Jean. Xeon was extremely greedy towards Tyrrhenas, but because of that, he was the easiest to convince. Yo, Tyrrhenas, it seems that little Duque has given you quite a bit of trouble. It's just trouble, Tyrrhenas said with a cold expression. Tell me, what do you want in order to support Pristos? I want the Hillsbrad Plains, the Jasper Mine, Tobalat Island and the western coast next to South Shore. He knew that Jean would ask for a lot, but he did not expect him to be so greedy. He took away more than half of the essence of Hillsbrad in one go. The Hillsbrad Plains had been reclaimed by the refugees of Stormwind. Now, everyone knew that it was a rich and fertile land. The refugees would all be evacuated next year. With the support of this fertile land, Gilnea's power would increase explosively in the next 20 years. Tyrrhenas said with a pained expression. All right. The second to meet was King Salas Trollbane of Stormguard. Tyrrhenas spoke first. Salas, you must support Lord Pristos this time. I can give you Terran Mill and South Shore. Salas sat in his luxurious chair like a statue. After a long while, he shook his head and said, Maybe their king and lord are guilty, but the people of Riptide Castle can't take Alterax's land. It's a blasphemy to our brave warriors. Tyrrhenas panicked when he heard Salas' words. Among the 6 human kingdoms, Kurtiras and Stormwind, who were outsiders, would vote against him. He needed at least 4 votes from the throne to make things look good. Who would have thought that Salas would reject him? Yes, that's right. Tyrrhenas' plan was to take Lordaeron's land for himself. Now that Salas was involved, he refused to play. How could he do that? Tyrrhenas' face darkened. Think about it, Salas. Your land has already become a wasteland. Even your food for the winter is provided by Lordaeron. You can be noble, but can you bear to see your people starve to death? The Arthi Highlands do not have much food to begin with. Salas' expression changed. Tyrrhenas was threatening him with food. South of Stromgard was the dwarves' territory. Whether it was the wetlands or Loch Moden, the dwarves barely had enough food for themselves. Other than Hillsbrad in the west, there was no other way out of the Arthi Highlands. If Alterac, controlled by Lordaeron, blocked the way out, then hundreds of thousands of people would starve to death. To restore Arthi's food production, his advisors told him that it would take at least 3 years. Moreover, he still had to rebuild Riptide Castle, which had been destroyed by the dragon. Salas lowered his head deeply, as if burying his head between his knees. I don't want the territory. Give me at least 500,000 tons of food every year for 5 years. As a noble knight, he hated political deals like this. As a king who was responsible for the future of millions of his people, he had no choice but to compromise with Tyrrhenas. Tyrrhenas left. He was not satisfied, but at least he had achieved his goal. At the third meeting, Tyrrhenas met the hardest nail, Antonidas, who he thought would be easier to convince. Tyrrhenas, I'm not against you. But the Dalajan rejected the Lord of Prister. Why? Tyrrhenas furrowed his brows. Because the Kirin Tor Assembly has secretly used all of their magic detection abilities, but still could not see through this mysterious Lord of Prister. He is either a Breaking Dawn mage on par with me, or he has a mysterious magical item that is comparable to a demigod gear. We will never support a mysterious person of unknown origin to be the king of Alterac. Chapter 595. No matter how hard Tyrrhenus tried, he could not convince Antonidas. From Tyrrhenus's perspective, this unreasonable archmage wanted to send someone he liked to Kirin Tor's dissection table to see what this mysterious person was made of. Tyrrhenus thought back to what Lord Presto had said in private. These crazy archmages are not good people. Your Majesty, have you ever thought that before opening the portal to grim battle, Antonidas would have sensed that there were a bunch of tribal chiefs there? Why did he insist on sending all of Lord Darren's elites there? Nearly 1,000 of Grim Battle's elite knights had died, and this was a pain in Tyrrhenus' heart. At the thought of this, he suddenly became distrustful of Antonidas. That's right, it was the great Tyrrhenus Menethil idea to make Lord Presto the king of Alterac. You bastards only have two choices. Obey obediently, or get out of my way. Antonidas, you're wrong. Letting a truly noble person rule Alterac, not a despicable traitor, is the wish of all the other human kingdoms. For the time being, I can't think of anyone better than Lord Presto. If there is, please let me know. If not, then I hope you can follow the will of Lord Darren. Also, if you are not suitable, the Alliance can still remove King Presto in the future. Antonidas was so angry at Tyrrhenus that he wanted to vomit blood. Since when was the Alliance above the king's power? Would that kid of unknown origin still be so obedient when he went up on stage? Would he give in so easily and leave the stage himself? Tyrrhenus, you won't have a good ending if you keep using force. Don't forget, Duque has already made his move. Even though he knew that Tyrrhenus hated Duque the most, Antonidas did not mind Duque being implicated. King Tyrrhenus immediately thought back to that time. That time, he tried to use the lower nobles to threaten the Bearer family and control the whole of Alterac. In the end, the people he sent out were hit with iron white gloves countless times and became useless. On the surface, that mission had nothing to do with Tyrrhenus, but everyone knew that it was a slap in the face to the Menethil royal family. Humph! Duque won't be able to save the Bearer family, Tyrrhenus said firmly. The drumming of the guards of honor outside grew louder and louder. The triumphant procession was about to reach the palace. Unless Tyrrhenus was seriously ill, he would have to go out and welcome the victorious warriors. Antonidas, promise me that the Dalagan will at least remain neutral on this matter. Otherwise, the Dalagan will be the enemy of the Rotterdam kingdom. After this is done, I will compensate the Dalagan. This was a blatant threat. Antonidas looked like he had just eaten shit. He almost had a stroke. After a long time, he squeezed out a word through his teeth. Okay. The kings who had just rested gathered again. In the huge square of the palace, Tyrrhenus received the cheers of more than 100,000 citizens. No matter what, it was the Rotterdam Kingdom Alliance, and the Rotterdam Kingdom was the leader of the alliance. This was an honor that no one could take away from him. After symbolically inspecting the captured orc weapons, Tyrrhenus walked in front of Orgrim. Originally, it was a very satisfying thing to have a great chieftain of an enemy force, whose strength was on par with each other, kneel to him. Being pressed down by 4 strong humans, the weak Orgrim could not take it anymore. Even his neck was almost broken. He lowered his proud head to Tyrrhenus. Unfortunately, he already knew that Orgrim did not have anything nice to say. Otherwise, Orgrim would have said the classic, "Orcs will never be slaves" line. Tyrrhenus was not interested in Orgrim's submission. To him, the orcs were a bunch of poor people. Not only did they cause trouble, but they also had nothing to gain from it. Other than being used as miners and gladiators, they had no value at all. So he pretended to accept the cheers of the 100,000 people, and ended the victory ceremony hastily. After entering the palace, just as the kings were about to sit down in the throne room, their true intentions were revealed. Wait, Xeon suddenly said. Not everyone has the right to enter here. Those who have the right to enter the throne room are either the kings and representatives of the various countries, or the heroes of the alliance. But now, there is a traitor here. King Gilnus's declaration shocked the dwarves and elves. Traitor? As Xeon pointed, Everyone's eyes immediately fell on Duke Berov, who was about to walk towards Alterac. Not only Duke Berov, but even General Haas, who was behind the Duke, suddenly turned pale. Duke Berov was attending the throne room as Alterac's representative. To accuse a country's representative in a meeting like this, how much hatred was there? Without sufficient evidence, this was definitely a huge matter that could push an entire country to its death. What evidence do you have? Duke Berov was trembling as he pointed at King Xian. Evidence? Of course I have it. Jean snapped his fingers, and the door to the side hall suddenly opened. 12 guards escorted 2 young men dressed in ordinary, but still relatively clean clothes into the hall. Looking at the 2 faces that looked similar to Duke Berov's, everyone knew that the mystery was solved. I think many of you have seen these 2 before. They are the sons of Duke Berov, the first and second in line to the Berov family, Wilton Berov and Alex Berov. Duke Berov felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His body trembled even more violently. He said in a trembling voice, "They disappeared long ago after the Alterac incident. I've already issued a declaration to strip the 2 unfilial sons of their inheritance and drive them out of the family. From that day on, everything they did had nothing to do with Duke Berov or Alterac. Now the only heir of the Berov family is Alicia Berov." "You stingy old man. How could you give the family's fortune to that bitch? I am the only heir of the Berov family." "No, it's me. Wilton, go to hell. I am the true heir of the Berov family." The 2 unfilial sons of the Berov family were already fighting amongst themselves without Xian's words. Duke Berov argued back, "That doesn't prove anything?" Xian dropped a bomb with a smile. "Yes, but everyone must know that it was because these 2 from the Berov family joined the horde that Orgrim's army was able to easily pass through the mountains of Alterac, avoid all the sentries, and kill their way to Lordaeron like a divine army descending from the heavens." Chapter 596. Boxes were carried out by the Rotterdam guards. Xian waved his hand. "This is the map of the Alliance's military deployment around the Alterac Mountains. There's also their pledge of loyalty to Orgrim. Oh, there's also the pledge of loyalty from all the Alterac nobles led by Piranod." Duke Berov's hands were trembling as he picked up a document. He had nothing to say, because the Berov family was in charge of the logistics of the entire Alterac Mountains. On the other hand, because he deliberately did not decide on an absolute successor, and wanted his 2 sons to compete for it, it caused his subordinates to split up, each supporting a certain prince. It was hard to guard against a thief in the family. Even the higher-ups of the Berov family, who gave the map to Wilton, and the Alex brothers did not expect them to betray their father long ago. Duke Berov also did not expect that the first mastermind was the dead Eden. He had used these 2 rebellious sons to get information. After the 2 brothers left for the tribe, these things fell into Orgrim's hands. There was no way to explain that these maps were indeed leaked by the Berov family. Even if it wasn't sh*T, it would still be sh*T. The guards of the royal family of the Rotterdam Kingdom passed the ironclad evidence to each of the kings. Even if they knew about this long ago, and even if it had been a long time ago, when they saw the signatures of the Alterac nobles, they still felt an indescribable anger. It was not just the kings. Only 2 attendants were allowed to stand behind each seat, and they had the same expression as their master. Of course there were exceptions. The 3 commanders, Andoin, Duque and Mograine, had their own seats. Unexpectedly, Andoin and Lang had brought Legolas, and the other 3 that Duque had invited. Behind Duque were Elysia and Aurelia. Last night, Duque had insisted that Duke Berov let Elysia follow him. Duke Berov now understood. Elysia's body was trembling slightly. She could fully understand how her father, who was being condemned by everyone at this moment, was being interrogated and tortured mentally. "You too, tell me everything you know. This is your final salvation." Jean waved his hand. Therefore, this pair of bastard brothers vividly told the truth that they knew. In their words, the Berov family had pledged their loyalty to the Horde even earlier than Eden Piraeus, in order to prevent their rich territory from being affected by the flames of war. However, the Berov family's way of doing things was smarter, and more in line with the style of nobles. That was to bet on both sides. As the only two heirs of the Barov family at that time, they first went to Orgrim to gain his trust. Prince Barov, on the other hand, stood aloof and unyielding. In this way, no matter if the alliance won, or if the horde destroyed the alliance, the glory of the Barov family would continue. Two sides, aren't they? However, this was indeed the style of a businessman, and the Barov family was such a family with a strong merchant atmosphere. There were witnesses, material evidence, motive, precedent, and background. Everything made sense. At this moment, almost all the kings believed it. Even King Dailingua looked at Duque suspiciously. On the other side, if not for Duque's warning, even King Lang would have believed it. However, even Lang was skeptical. If it wasn't for the fact that he had never done such a thing before, even Alex Barov himself would have believed it. The old duke's heart sank into a bottomless, icy hell. He looked at his two sons, who had become greedy due to their lack of discipline, and allowed themselves to be manipulated by those clever politicians. Suddenly he laughed maniacally. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Loud and unbridled laughter reverberated throughout the entire throne room. What are you laughing at, you despicable traitor? King Jean scolded. No, I'm just laughing at myself. I gave birth to my sons, but because of the family business, I did not teach them well. In the end, they turned into two super bastards. Old man, watch your mouth. We are both traitors of the alliance. What right do you have to laugh at me? Faced with the scolding of his two sons, Duke Barov's laughter grew colder and colder. He looked at his sons, as if he was looking at two dead men. Foolish sons. Do you think those greedy bastards who are after Alterax's land will honor their promise to you two idiots? Honor? Maybe they will. But if they give you the property and land today, they can take it back next year with a random excuse, and send you to the gallows. No one would really protect two traitors of the alliance. The old duke hit the nail on the head and told the truth, which really made the two stupid sons shiver. Jean suddenly felt that the situation was getting out of hand. He turned to look at Tarinas. Tarinas knew that this was all the sly old fox Jean was willing to do. He glanced at the expressionless Duque, and pretended to stand up. All right. Since His Majesty Grameen has presented the evidence that Duke Barov is a traitor of the alliance, do you have anything to say? Or rather, Duke, do you have any evidence to prove your innocence? Evidence? How could there be any evidence to prove his innocence in such a matter? It was as stupid as asking you to prove that your mother was your mother. Duke Barov trembled. He knew that if King Guinevere and King Lordaeron dared to plot against him, they would not leave any loopholes. In front of these two absolute rulers, a duke who was not even a king was just a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. In fact, his two idiotic sons had indeed joined the horde. He did not look at Duque. From the moment Duque refused to cooperate, he no longer had any hope that Duque would help him. His only hope was that Duque could protect Elugia. The old duke raised his head proudly. King Menethil, you win. What do you mean I win? Tarinas said shamelessly. This is the alliance, and we value fairness and justice. If there is enough evidence, even the testimony of a king can be overturned. Elugia, who was standing beside Duque, could not hold it in any longer. She slowly reached out with trembling hands and tugged on the sleeve of Duque's robe. 1 second later, at this unexpected moment, Duque suddenly raised his right hand and requested to speak. Tarina's heart skipped a beat, but he pretended to be calm. Sir Marcus, Duque smiled. I would like to interrogate the horde's great chief Orgrim. I would like to hear from him whether he captured the Barov brothers in the Alterac palace, or whether he received help from the two brothers. Chapter 597. Anduin would never forget how his treasured sword, Quelzarum, was broken. That's right. His sword could not harm a person of noble character. If he was not 100% sure before, then everything that happened after he brought the shard back to the Archbishop of Holy Light, Alonsis Vale, and placed it in the holy pool in Stratholme confirmed his suspicions. This was because the shattered divine sword was actually being reforged by itself. Although it was slow, it was indeed being reforged. In other words, if this deduction was correct, then Orgrim, as a person of noble character, would definitely tell the truth, even if it was related to a duke of the opposing faction who was not important to him. Anduin's eyes lit up. I agree with Lord Marcus. We need the testimony of the Horde's chief, Orgrim, as an important witness. King Leon shuddered at this moment, and he immediately understood why this was happening. After all, Lang's once invincible sword was broken at a crucial moment on the battlefield, and he almost lost his best friend. This made Lang feel conflicted for a long time. I agree as well, Lang chimed in. Duke Barov raised his head. He was stunned, but there was also a hint of hope. Because Duque did not abandon him when he was at his most desperate. He did not know what the point of interrogating Orgrim was, but at least it was a hope. At this time Tyrrhenus spoke. Summon the chief, Orgrim, if he is still sane. A servant left after receiving the order. At this moment Duke Barov, Lang, and Anduin all felt their hearts skip a beat. After a moment, as expected. Your Majesties, the Horde's great chief Orgrim has suffered a severe mental shock due to today's captive offering ceremony. He seems to be going crazy and is struggling non-stop. We have no choice but to add 2 sets of the largest shackles on him, each weighing 100 pounds. That's right, Tyrrhena's words were a hint. After realizing that Orgrim, whom they had been neglecting, could be a flaw and a variable, they made up for it. Perhaps they used some kind of drug to temporarily make Orgrim lose his sanity. All of a sudden, all chances of turning the tables were gone. Duke Barov's face was ashen. Anduin was a little puzzled. With Duque's intelligence, he shouldn't have given his opponent a chance to make up for his flaws. What was Duque trying to do? Tyrrhenus spoke. Then, there seems to be no other way. We can only follow Orgrim's confession. Do you have any other requests or new evidence? If not, then we will hold a throne vote to decide whether or not to label the Alex Barov family as traitors of the alliance. The air was filled with silence. Tyrrhenus ignored the doubtful and disapproving looks, as well as the sobbing of Elysia. Then let's begin the voting. The throne voting was the highest form of voting in the alliance. At first, in order to prevent the commanders from coming from the same country, the commanders themselves did not have the right to vote. Each country would have 1 vote, and the leader of the Rotterdam Kingdom would have 2 votes. The countries involved had no right to vote. They could vote for, against, or abstain from voting. The motion would be decided by the result with the most votes. If the number of votes for and against is the same, the alliance country will be the final decision. Kings who think that the Barov family is a traitor, please raise your hand. Jean was the first to raise his hand, followed by Salas and Antonidas, and finally Tyrrhenus. Now, according to the alliance leader's double vote, there were 5 votes. But that was it. Tyrrhenus suddenly felt a little uneasy. He pretended to be calm and said, "All right, those who object, please raise your hand. Those who abstain from voting, you can remain silent." Lang was the first to speak. This time, the voting rights of Stormwind will be given to Duke Marcus. Almost as soon as Lang finished speaking, Duque spoke. His voice was loud and full of authority. Stormwind objects. King Dalen frowned. As one of the staunchest allies of Stormwind, he immediately followed. Kurtiras objects. A situation that Tyrrhenus had never expected had happened. He had thought that the dwarves would take an indifferent attitude. He even knew that Lang did not communicate with the dwarves about this. Unexpectedly, when Magni saw that it was Duque who objected, he slammed the armrest of the throne. Cosmodin objects. Along with Magni's loud voice, Kudrin Wildhammer said, Eagle's Nest Mountain objects. Who was Magni Bronzebeard? He was the leader of the dwarves, the Ironforge Bronzebeard dwarf. He was on the same side as the gnomes. Magni objected, and Master Craftsman Gerben immediately followed. Gnomerigan objects. At this moment, Tyrrhenus's face turned green. He finally saw it. These bastards did not look at the evidence or reason. They simply objected because Duque objected. Rather than believing in objective things, they believed in Duke's judgment, who had truly helped them. In this suspicious matter, they clearly stood on Duque's side. Alright, now it was 5 against 5. In theory, if this was the final result, Tyrrhenus could still use his power as the leader of the alliance to pass this motion. The problem was there was still one country that had the right to vote. Suddenly, All eyes fell on the face of Prince Kale. That's of Kuel Salis, who represented the Sun King in the victory ceremony. The handsome Kaiser's face was burning hot. He never thought that he would be involved in the battle between the leader of the alliance, Tyrrhenas, and Duque. Before this, there was no news of this at all. No country's representative came to him. This was definitely a political disgrace for Kuel Salis, because it meant that the High Elves were being marginalized in the political arena. Of course, in a sense, this was also the result of the High Elves' long-term self-isolation. Personally, he should definitely help Duque. Unfortunately, he knew the mood of the kingdom very well. Even though Duque led the army to save Kuel Salis still sent a lot of reinforcements to the Alliance's army in the later stages of the war. In fact, the entire upper echelons of Kuel Salis hated Duque. Simple jealousy. What they could not do, Duque did. They could not protect their own kingdom, and they still needed Duque's help. The arrogant elves' faces were dark. Moreover, the counselor Marion they sent was said to be a servant of the wings of death, and was captured by the Red Dragon Queen. Many counselors could not take it emotionally, and could only secretly vent their anger on Duque. Therefore in public Kale that's could not help Duque. After a long while Kale that's finally said, Kuel Salis abstains. Chapter 598. Kale that's was in a miserable situation. He never thought that things would turn out this way. Right now he was stuck in the middle, with no one on either side. After Kuel Salis was invaded, Kale that's had a clear understanding that the era of isolationism was over. He didn't know what would happen in the future, but it was right to have a good relationship with Rotterdam. On the other hand, it was also irrational to offend Duque, the smartest person in the entire alliance. Not only did he feel like his long-term emotional investment had gone to waste, but he also had an ominous premonition that came from fate. This made Kale that's very uncomfortable. If he didn't want to play it safe, and wanted to see the situation clearly before making a decision, this wouldn't have happened. If the previous vote had already been decided, Kuel Salis wouldn't have to be a clown. He never thought that after Lang handed over the voting rights to Duque, the 5 heads of state actually completed 5 votes in 3 seconds, and all of them were against. This pushed Kuel Salis to the top of the wave. After shouting out the word abstain with all his courage, Kale that's mouthed in sorry to Duque. He didn't know how much of Duque's impression of him would be restored by doing this, but if he didn't do anything, he would never forgive himself. It's okay. Duque didn't mouth it, but said it out softly. You heard at least half of the kings. This made Kale that's feel awkward again. Someone else was the one who was really embarrassed. Tyrrhenas was forced to a dead end. He had never imagined that the alliance would be split because of a duke from a small country. He was so close to being slapped in the face. Of course, he could suppress the accusation of Duke Barev's rebellion for the sake of the alliance's harmony. That way, he would have to face a lot of opposition in the country. All his previous plans against Alterac would be for naught. In fact, from the beginning, Tyrrhenas knew that it was impossible to completely annex Alterac in a short period of time. So from the beginning he used a more indirect method, such as handing it over to someone who was trustworthy, talented, and seemed to be interested in peace and unity. Unfortunately, it seemed that even the first step of clearing the obstacles for Lord Prestel's ascension to the throne was met with great resistance. He really wanted to kill Duque. Why did the Stormwind Kingdom publicly announce that all the refugees would retreat within a year, and that they had no intention of touching any part of the Rotterdam Kingdom's territory at all? Yet at this juncture, the Rotterdam Kingdom was stuck between a rock and a hard place. If Alicia was really Duque's woman, Tyrrhenas might be more wary, but no matter how many times he checked, the maids of Rotterdam swore that Alicia was definitely a virgin. He really did not understand why Duque, who had no interest in Alterac, would protect Duke Barev. Tyrrhenas Menethil gripped the king's scepter tightly in his hand, the muscles in his face trembling, and he took 3 deep breaths. He still made a decision. According to the iron law of the Alliance, I hereby, as the leader of the Rotterdam Alliance, declare that although there is no concrete evidence to prove that Duke Barev was involved in the rebellion against the Alliance, the Barav family of Alterac is guilty. Yes, he was still guilty. If he didn't announce it, all of his plans would go up in smoke. Lordaeron's losses in the war would be irreparable. Lordaeron, the strongest human kingdom, would lose all of its face. The price he paid to Xeon, the political capital he used to threaten Salas, and the consequences of forcing Dalaran to obey him would all go down the drain. He would have to bear all of it himself. There was no turning back. Tyrrhenus had no choice but to declare it, even if it meant offending many kingdoms, and the most legendary hero of the alliance, Duke Marcus. On the other side, Alicia's body trembled, but Duque held her hand. Alicia looked up in disbelief, and suddenly heard Duque's words. I express my extreme regret for this sentence, and Stormwind reserves the right to protest in the future. Duque was going to go against Tyrrhenus. According to the alliance, the punishment for traitors will be decided by the leader. Tyrrhenus decided to ignore Duque's words, but in his heart, he was already a little afraid. Originally, he was going to sentence Duke Barav to death, because Duke Barav's influence in Alterac was just too shocking. If he did not clear the obstacles, he did not know if Lord Presto would be able to fully control Alterac. His biggest mistake was to misjudge Duque's influence in the alliance. Tyrrhenus stared at Duque, and saw the threat in Duque's eyes. His heart skipped a beat, but he gritted his teeth and changed his words. In the name of the leader of the Rotterdam Alliance, I announce that in view of the Barav family's full support to the alliance, their crimes will be reduced. Duke Barav will be stripped of his title and demoted to a commoner, and all of the Barav family's land will be taken away. Their land will be controlled by the future king of Alterac. Alex Barav and his family will be allowed to leave with all their belongings, but will be banned from entering Alterac for the rest of their lives. This is the final sentence. Almost as soon as he finished speaking, Duke Barav seemed to have aged several decades in an instant. From a man in his twilight years, he became an old man with one foot in the grave. At this time Duque's voice rang out again. What a regrettable sentence. All right, I will also take this opportunity to announce that Countess Alicia Barav of Stormwind will be granted the Redridge Mountain, Lake of Tranquility, and Lakeside Town. A slap in the face. A direct slap in the face. Even though Duque did not do anything, Tyrrhenus felt as if he had been slapped countless times by Duque. His face felt like it was on fire. On the other side, he used his authority as the leader of the alliance to strip the Barav family of their roots. In this era, land was the foundation of everything. As long as there was fertile land, the family, and even the kingdom, would be able to prosper forever. Duke, on the other hand, followed the rules of the game of nobles, directly turning Alicia Barav from a nobleman with no roots into a real noble in the truest sense. Everyone could see that Duque was not willing to cut off the Barav family's roots for Rotterdam, and was going after Tyrrhenus to slap his face. No one understood why Duque would do this, but at this moment Alicia, who was standing diagonally behind Duque, had tears streaming down her face. She suddenly made a shocking decision. She raised her head and said loudly, I announce that I, Alicia Barav, will renounce the Barav family name. Chapter 599. Aluhia was very brave. This was an era where bloodlines were very important. Almost every noble considered themselves descendants of Thoradin the Great. In fact, even the current royal families of the Seven Kingdoms were mostly companions who fought alongside Thoradin the Great 2,800 years ago. For example, Tyrrhena's ancestor, Lordan, and Sorash Trollbane's ancestor was given the surname Trollbane by the Great. No one could deny the importance of a noble bloodline in the human world. Everyone knew that since Duque dared to protect Aluhia, the Barav family would not be severed in the distant future. In a sense, as long as Aluhia still carried the name of Barav, even if she was defined as a traitor, although this traitor was questionable, she would still be a noble daughter. Under the premise that Duque refused to marry a princess of the Seven Kingdoms, even if he married Aluhia and changed her surname to Barav, no one would think that there was anything wrong with Duque. On the contrary, the Marcus that Duque made up was a lowly surname in the eyes of the nobles. And Aluhia's announcement of giving up her surname was actually out of good intentions. She did not want Duque to offend the strongest human kingdom, Lord Darren, because of her. That was the thinking of the nobles of Azeroth. Tyrrhenas heaved a sigh of relief when Aluhia made that declaration. In the eyes of many kings and nobles, Duque's side had given in. Giving up the surname meant that the lineage was broken. Even if you had the so-called noble bloodline, no nobles would recognize your bloodline unless it was absolutely necessary. Who knew? Duque was not going to have it. Shut up. Aluhia, your two brothers should be hanged, but your father is not guilty. Taking away the fief is already the biggest punishment for you and your parents. Since His Highness Menethil did not take away the surname of Barov, you don't have to, and you don't have the right to give her up. The count under me can only be Alicia Barov, and not a woman without a surname. As soon as these words came out, the throne room simply shook the earth and mountains. Crazy. He was going crazy. Duque was going to fight Tyrrhenas to the death. What kind of enmity did they have with each other? Generally speaking, there was no enmity of killing one's father or stealing one's wife, nor was there any feud between the two countries. It was impossible for there to be such opposing emotions. What was Duque doing? If it was in private, Tyrrhenas would have exploded like a volcano. But this was a throne conference. You are condemning Prince Barov. He is conferring a daughter, and in theory it is not the same thing at all. Tyrrhenas trembled violently, as if he had been electrocuted by Yang Shosho. Duque wasn't just slapping him in the face. He was slapping him in the face, peeling off his skin, spitting on him, peeing on him, and finally playing disco dancing on his ancestral grave. If he didn't do something to suppress Duque today, then he really wouldn't be able to survive in the future. Only Lang and Anduin knew that Duque was not giving Tyrrhenas any chance at all. They looked at the four guards behind them and chose to remain silent. Take your father away, Countess Alugia. After instructing Alugia to support the old Duke, who could barely walk, Duke Barov left. Duke once again looked at Tyrrhenas. Tyrrhenas finally made his move. He stood up and raised the king's scepter high. Today is a day of celebration for the Alliance's victory. We have expelled the traitor Barov from the Alliance. Today is also a day of celebration for the 11 countries of the Alliance. I believe that there should be no empty seats on the 11 thrones. So I would like to introduce the descendant of the Alterac royal family, the Lord of Pristo. First, the door to the side hall opened, and a group of Rotterdam royal family guards walked in, each holding a copy of the identity document of the Lord of Pristo. In this era, the most important thing to prove a noble's bloodline was a genealogy. A set of magically preserved genealogy was the most valuable evidence. Then, with a so-called ancestral relic, and a simple blood test to match the marriage partner between nobles with the royal genealogy of other families, they would basically be 100% confirmed as descendants of nobles. Seeing this, Duque was dumbfounded. Damn, this is the so-called absolute proof? Forget about DNA. There wasn't even a blood test. Duque felt like he was in a trance. Acting pretentious was actually this simple. If I had known earlier, I would have also gotten myself a pretentious genealogy, and then made up my name to be the Kaiser and Caesar emperors, who followed great Emperor Saladin. Duque silently looked at the group of kings and nodded. Then, the main character of the day finally appeared. Many people thought that the Lord of Pristo's expression would be even happier. After all, it was not every day that someone became a king. Of course, the hereditary one was not one of them. When the 5-meter-tall main door of the main hall opened with a trumpet, Lord de War Pristo walked out from the fully open magnificent door. Many people who saw this lord for the first time were shocked. Lothar was already very tall and burly among humans, but this Lord of Pristo was even taller. At a glance he was at least 10 meters tall. For humans this was the domain of giants. He wasn't fat, but he wasn't tall and skinny either. He wore a black and silver-edged robe that fitted him very well. The deep black gave others a noble and elegant impression, and the silver lines outlined his perfect figure. Of course, the most eye-catching part was the ferocious dragon head embroidery on his left chest. The ferocity of the dragon head leaping out of his clothes was even more powerful than the lion emblem of Stormwind. At this moment, he clearly hadn't participated in the war against the Horde, but he just looked like a mighty war hero. It was rare for Aurelia to tease Duque at a time like this. Duque, he looks more like a hero in the Alliance than you do. Just like, Duque replied calmly. Lord Pristo first saluted Tyrrhena's, then bowed elegantly. From the north, to the east, to the south, and then to the west, he repeated this gesture in every direction of the throne room. It was an incomparable gesture of etiquette. It was as if only when this young noble was here, the soft, smooth curtains, golden chandeliers, and even the pure white marble steps could make this throne room look grand and majestic. De War Pristo greets your majesties and commanders. After greeting everyone, Pristo stood straight like a javelin in the middle of the throne room. Chapter 600. The kings had mixed feelings about this. Even though they knew that this was the only candidate that Tyrrhena's had chosen to inherit the Alterac kingdom, many of the kings already had an instinctive resistance when they heard about this, and they had a bad preconceived impression of him. However, when Presto stood up, everyone had a feeling that this man was someone who could be trusted by everyone under any circumstances, and was also someone who deserved to be trusted and respected. Amidst the slightly confused atmosphere, a few gasps of admiration rang out at the same time. If only Arthas had him like this. If only Tamriel could be like him. William still has room to improve. If it was Tyrrhena's, they could say that he was biased. However, the praises came from Dalen and Lang, two kings who had different political views from Tyrrhena's. One had to admit that this lord was very charismatic. On the other side, Antonidas secretly injected arcane power into the blood vessels in his eyeballs. This was a very risky thing to do. If the arcane power went out of control, he would be blinded on the spot. The uneasiness in his heart made him do this. Damn it! Even this didn't work. In the vision created by the arcane power, the figure standing in the middle of the hall was like a giant black hole, sucking in all light and heat. It was as if even the eyes that were filled with magic were going to be sucked into it. No, it wasn't just as if. The power that came from the mysterious domain was using an unparalleled suction force to suck Dalaran's eyeballs out of his eye sockets. Antonidas could only feel his consciousness starting to collapse. Slap. With the last of his consciousness, Antonidas slapped his old face. The crisp sound attracted the attention of all the kings and representatives. Oh, sorry, there's a mosquito. Antonidas hurriedly lowered his head. He still felt that the mysterious lord was up to no good, but he had no evidence at all. Should he tell the kings in front of everyone? Lord Presto has a divine artifact on him, and he stopped me from looking at him. Can you ask him to take that divine artifact down, so that I can use my arcane power to look at his body? If he dared to do this, he must be crazy. Who was Davar Presto? He was the only one with the bloodline of the Alterac royal family, and was destined to inherit the Alterac kingdom. As long as he went through the motions, he would be able to sit on the empty throne, and be on equal footing with the other 9 kings and representatives. Antonidas decided to remain silent. Tyrrhena's cleared his throat and said, Lord Presto, this is no longer the time when the countries are isolated from each other. The invasion of the Horde was cruel and terrifying, but it also brought about a great unity among the 4 races that had not been seen in the past 3,000 years. As the leader of the Rotterdam Kingdom Alliance, I think as an elder, I hope that you can introduce yourself to the kings and tell them how you want to get along with the various allies in the future. King Tyrrhena stroked his bearded chin in satisfaction. He was looking forward to the debut of the Lord, who had never disappointed him. In his eyes, Lord Presto was perfect. Presto raised his head and stared at the sky with his eyes that were as deep as the night. War is cruel. Just this sentence, just this opening that was full of masculine charm, caused a silent uproar among the kings. For this terrible war, the alliance has sacrificed too much. The fertile farmland has been turned into scorched earth. Millions of farmers became soldiers and sacrificed their lives on that great battlefield. Now the war is over, but all of us in the alliance must work together to rebuild this continent, feed the people, and bring life back to the land. I saw a report that made my heart ache. The Alterac Kingdom is less than half of what it was before the war. But just to the west of the Alterac Kingdom, the fertile silverpine forest, that originally belonged to Guinevere and Rotterdam, has been turned into scorched earth that cannot be cultivated for many years due to the infernal weapons. When Presto said this, Duque's eyebrows twitched. This blame is on me? Presto did not notice. Or perhaps he noticed but ignored Duke's reaction. He continued. In the east, the few highlands of Earthy were burned by the dragon breath of the Red Dragon army that belonged to the Horde's camp. In the throne room, Salas Trollbane's face twitched in pain. It doesn't take much imagination to predict that if we don't change everything, hundreds of thousands of people will die of famine next year. What a sad thing it is. Lord Presto's passionate voice quickly infected all the kings. Even the kings who were already aware of this felt the same way. If I become the king of Alterac, to make up for the mistakes Alterac made in the war, and to make up for the relationship with the surrounding countries, I will only choose to keep the farmland around Stanbrad, because this small amount of farmland is enough to feed 60,000 Alterac citizens. Briar and Caer Darren were loaned to Rotterdam, Hillsbrad Plains were loaned to Gilness, Rotterdam Mill Plains were loaned to Dalaran, and Terran Mill and South Shore Town were loaned to Stormguard. Each place will be rented unconditionally for 20 years. As soon as he said this, the kings were shocked. This was so generous. Although these lands originally belonged to the Bear of family, and although he was also the king that Turinas supported, he was really willing to give them away. Aurelia giggled and said to Duque through the whisper of the wind, Duque, why do I feel like he's more generous than you? Haha. Duque replied with a sentence that could do anything. On the other side, the kings of the 4 countries were moved. Some of them were part of the deal, but some were added by Lord Presto himself. Turinas didn't want Briar and Caer Darren at this time to avoid looking too unsightly. Everyone knew that the so-called loan, it was easy to not return it after borrowing it. There were many such things in the history of Azeroth. After thinking for a while, Turinas spoke. Thank you for your generosity, Presto Lord. But this is not a good precedent, so please forgive Lord Darren for rejecting your kindness. But Turinas changed the topic and said to Salas, I think Rapid Hold needs Alterac's selfless help more than any other member of the Alliance. If King Trollbane doesn't object, then let's sign the loan contract under the witness of the Alliance. Chapter 601. Turinas was very smart. He let Trollbane, who was originally just a passerby, take the blame. Did Salas have a choice? He immediately understood what Turinas was trying to do. Isn't Riptide Stronghold in need of food? Then start with this first. Otherwise, if they don't want it, don't expect to have food next year. What else could he say? Salas could only nod bitterly. Then I thank you on behalf of the people of Stromgard. But it won't take as long as 20 years. At this time, Salas suddenly met Xion's reproachful gaze. He had to change his words. All right, then Stromgard will accept it. As long as Alterac asks, we will return the land next year. Now it was obvious that they were saying, do you dare to take the land if they are willing to give it to you? With Salas as the first target, would the other kingdoms be far behind? Dalen, Magni, Kudrin, Kale, these kings and representatives who had no need for Alterac's land all frowned. On the surface, everything seemed to be going according to the rules. Anyone with a discerning eye would immediately realize that this was actually 3 rogue kingdoms, pulling a kingdom that had no choice but to submit. In the name of justice and cooperation, this was the cruelest way to divide up a weak kingdom like Alterac. Almost every king and representative who did not participate could not help but ask themselves, is this the kind of alliance our kingdom wants? At this time, Lord Presto suddenly bowed deeply. I am impressed by the greatness of Lord Darren. But, Your Majesty, you may not think for yourself, but I hope you can think for the people of Silverpine Forest who have lost their land. How about this? Your Majesty's beloved daughter, Princess Kalia, is the most beautiful person in the world. If I ascend the throne, please allow me to propose to Princess Kalia with Briar and Caer Darren as betrothal gifts. A single stone caused 1,000 ripples. The other kingdoms who were still a little suspicious finally saw Terinas's moves. First, he used real or fake evidence to get rid of Duke Barov, the most powerful person in Alterac. Then, he supported a real puppet to take over. Finally, he used a royal marriage to solidify their friendship and alliance. Of course, 10 or 20 years later, if this King Presto accidentally died, then the little prince with Menethil's royal blood would become king. What was annexation? This was annexation. Humph! Dai-Lin and Magni snorted coldly. Kudrin and Gerben didn't know that much, but when they saw Magni's cold snort, they also followed suit. It sounded like a humming duet. Terinna's was embarrassed to be sneered at by the four kings. However, Brill and Caer Daren were two super fertile lands. The show could only go on. Terinna's pretended not to hear, and put on the face of a kind elder. If Kalia doesn't object. I'm sorry, I'm a father before I'm a king. I need my daughter's approval. Of course. Presto bowed deeply again. The kings did not have to wait for long. Princess Kalia, who had probably been waiting for a long time, arrived. After not seeing her for a long time, Princess Kalia had become even more beautiful. A 16-year-old girl was at the golden age of beauty, starting to transform from a young girl to a mature woman. Perhaps it was an illusion, but Princess Kalia seemed to have grown a little taller. She looked even taller, and she easily wore this pure white lace dress that looked like a wedding dress. She had a head of brilliant golden hair, which looked dreamy under the light muslin draped over her head. Her jade-white skin was nurtured by the water of Lake Lordimir. Only this white veil, made from moon cloth, could compare to her skin. This was a compliment, and it was also a fact. In this era of handicrafts, unless one could get their hands on the legendary Devil's Cloth, the moon cloth that was purified by the night elves' moonwell water would have the whiteness and smoothness of white snowflakes. Princess Kalia's skin had reached this stage, and her beauty had risen to the level of a work of art. The jade-like face under the white veil seemed to have matured a little, but the aura of a young girl still dominated. Looking down, the pair of breasts that were not small to begin with seemed to have grown a little. Although this size was slightly smaller than Aurelia's, who could say for sure that Princess Kalia would not have the legendary second puberty? Looking down, it was clear that her waspy waist had gone through the torture of the waist corset. From a distance, it already looked like a matchstick. Under her slender waist was a gorgeous pleated gauze dress that looked like a blooming white peony. Princess Kalia looked like a beautiful bride today. While the kings were marveling at Princess Kalia's beauty, they were all secretly cursing Terinna's tricks. On the other side, Lord Presto had already walked forward, knelt on one knee, and took out a gift from his space storage bag. This world's most beautiful rose, for the world's most beautiful you. Ah! Countless kings exclaimed. It was a very beautiful rose made of ice crystals. They had no idea how this ice rose, which looked cold from afar, was made. Under everyone's gaze, the rose reflected the most psychedelic and moving rainbow colors under the sunlight that shone through the huge glass window. Beautiful beyond compare. Mesmerizing and dazzling. No girl who was in love for the first time would not like this kind of special gift that was so dazzling and beautiful that it could not be described with words. Unless this girl had seen better with her own eyes. Ah! Princess Kalia looked very apologetic, and then she yawned. Yes, a yawn. A yawn that symbolized boredom and contempt. A yawn that made Lord de War Presto confused, and made King Terinus suddenly feel that something was wrong. King Terinus suddenly understood why. Kalia was a good and obedient child. She knew her fate from a young age, and would never dare to resist his will. But the other's gift was not good enough, and he could not force Kalia to force herself to admit that this was the best gift in the world. Right? Damn it. At this moment, Terinus felt like killing someone. I'm sorry, Lord Presto. Although I would like to say that your rose is the most beautiful in the world, I cannot lie as a believer of the holy light. As she said this, Kalia took out what looked like an ice rose from her space storage bag. Under the dazzling sunlight, every single ice rose petal was clearly visible. Layer upon layer, they formed a blooming rose. Not only that, but there was a faint flame flowing between the cold petals and petals flickering. Just this dreamlike appearance alone caused the kings to exclaim in surprise. Presto was stunned. Tyrrhenus was stunned. Many kings who had not seen this before were stunned. Chapter 602. If Lord Presto's gift to Princess Kalia was a work of art, then what Princess Kalia brought out now was a masterpiece that surpassed the realm of art. Now what Princess Kalia had brought out was a masterpiece that surpassed the realm of art. A godly masterpiece. It was a god-level masterpiece. When the kings could not help but exclaim in admiration, King Tyrrhenus slapped his forehead. He could not believe his eyes. If Presto had given a more exquisite gift, it would have been acceptable. Why did he have to give her a rose? If Presto had given her a more exquisite gift, it would have been acceptable. Why did he have to give her a rose? Was he not looking for trouble? With Duke's incomparably perfect magic rose as an example, any lesser rose would be a disgrace that would be thrown into the endless sea. Goss, who stood behind Lang, had been squinting ever since he entered the throne room, as if he did not care about anything in the world. However, when he saw the magic rose made of ice and fire magic, he said, "Not bad." This comment made his other three companions look at him. After all, he did not care about all the magic of the elves and humans in the world. But now Duque's rose was worthy of his not bad comment. Tyrrhenus regretted giving Kalia the best space storage bag. That thing could stop the time of non-living things. But it was too late. Lord Presto's face finally lost his composure. He could hear the whispers from the thrones around him. Sigh, why did he have to compete with Duque, who looks like a morning star wizard, but is actually more skillful than a breaking dawn wizard? This first impression is terrible. It's fine, it's just a bet. Turning back is not a given. Some kings discussed, some laughed coldly. But for the first time, Duque felt the malice from Presto. Duque's troubles did not stop there. The whispers of the great demon king came from the wind. Duque, so you gave the beautiful Princess Kalia such a beautiful rose. I've learned something new. Be good, stop fooling around. There's nothing between me and Princess Kalia. I'm not messing around. I'm just calmly telling you that this Ranger Aurelia Windrunner is a little jealous. Well, the amount of vinegar there is about the same size as the Wind Lake. Hey, a wind lake with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers? So jealous? You call this calm? You call this xiao? Just a mirror only? Is it worth it? Duque turned his head back bitterly, but he caught a glimpse of Aurelia's sly smile from the corner of his eyes. Of course it's not worth it for the small matter before, but I'm going to be jealous for the big matter later. Don't ask me why I know. It's just a woman's intuition. On the other side, the proposal drama had already reached its climax. Presto's first offering was undoubtedly a failure. This Sir Lord's talent and knowledge were superior to all the other kings present. He knelt down resolutely on one knee. Because of his stature, even if he knelt down, he was still not much shorter than Kalia. This made Princess Kalia very uncomfortable. Almost subconsciously, she took a step back. Presto seemed to have activated his Casanova mode, directly using poetry to praise Kalia's beauty, already declaring his love for the princess. Duque's translation device could not completely translate Presto's poems. Seeing Tyrrhenus, Xian, Salas, and Lang, who had a high standard in poetry, all showed an intoxicated expression, one could imagine how good this mysterious Sir Lord's literary skills were. Before Duque's transmigration, he was a super strong person who was proficient in everything, including the 3-character classic, 5-character verse, 7-character quatrains, 8-character essay, tang poetry, song poetry, etc. Unfortunately, Kalia's reaction was like a stone sinking into the ocean. For some reason, if it were any other princess or noble girl, they would definitely have fallen for these sweet words on the spot. Princess Kalia, who was famous for her weak personality, seemed to have eaten a weight of steel at this moment, and just did not buy it. Ugh. Why do I feel that the atmosphere is a little miserable and cold? My balls hurt. Tyrrhenus also noticed something was wrong. After Presto finished reciting a poem, he had to interrupt. My child Kalia, such an outstanding young man. Not only is he of noble birth, but he is also extremely kind and wise. A young man like Davar Presto is a rare talent that only appears once in 1,000 years. He is different from those so-called heroes of unknown origins. Yes, Duque was unjustly implicated. Kalia held on to the hem of her dress with both hands, pursing her lips and not saying a word. Terenas was at his wit's end. They had clearly agreed on this during dinner last night, and Kalia had accepted her fate. Why did she change her mind now? He had to make a big move. Lord Presto is the man who will soon become the king of Alterac. Only when he ascends to the throne can he ensure the peace of the Lordaeron Continent Alliance, and that hundreds of thousands of people will not starve to death in the coming year. Such an outstanding man-child. What are you hesitating for? You should know that there are not many men in this world who are worthy of you. At this moment, Princess Kalia's eyes were clearly filled with tears, but she still did not speak. Terenas was also anxious, and simply announced, "I'm sorry, everyone. My child seems to be a little too excited. As a father, I will agree to Lord Presto's proposal on her behalf. Then, since today is the day of victory for the Alliance, let us celebrate His Majesty Presto's ascension to the throne, and his engagement to my daughter Kalia. All right, I'll ask you one last time, regarding their matter, who agrees and who disagrees?" It had to be said that the wedding customs of Azeroth were very similar to the Western wedding customs of Duque's pre-transmigration world. Before the ceremony, the priest would symbolically ask, "Who disagrees with the marriage between the bride and the groom?" In 99% of the cases, this was just bullsh*t to go through the motions. But today at this moment, that 1 in 10,000 chance had appeared. Kalia spoke again, and her words were earth-shattering. It was as if she had mustered every drop of courage in her body, and her voice was clearly trembling, as if she was about to cry. "Esteemed father, can I not marry Presto?" Silence. Dead silence. Everyone was dead silent. What was going on? Not only were the faces of the kings very interesting, even Presto's face looked as if it had been smeared with something called a joke. It was very interesting. Terenas had painstakingly built up his forces, secretly suppressed Barov, and put on a big show. Wasn't it all to help Presto rise to power, and then use the marriage to control Alterac? Chapter 603. Now the most important thing was that Princess Kalia was rebelling against him. At this moment, many kings were laughing in their hearts. As the saying goes, if you are too smart, you will end up hurting yourself. Wasn't this like shooting yourself in the foot? It was very rude to laugh at this time, but it was a big mistake to expect the impatient dwarves to be polite. Wahahaha. Ha 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 ha. Terenas, your daughter doesn't even want to marry. Why are you still forcing her? The shameless Magni and Kudrin, the two distant relatives, hugged their bellies and laughed wildly. Then the great craftsman Jurban also let out a shrill laugh unique to dwarfs. Countless veins popped out on Terena's forehead, and his old face swelled to the color of a pig's liver. He could no longer control himself, and his voice became extremely sharp. "Kalia, this is not the time for you to throw a tantrum. As a member of the Menethil royal family, your marriage has been destined to serve the country from the start. Let me tell you, you must marry Presto. Whether you like it or not, you will marry him. You can only marry him in this life, and not any other man." Kalia was so wronged that she burst into tears. In the next second, Kalia burst out with an incomparably explosive statement. "Duque, what are you waiting for? Have you forgotten what you promised me?" Suddenly, the three unscrupulous dwarfs stopped laughing. Suddenly, all the other kings and representatives focused their strange gazes on Duque, who had been pretending to be a passerby ever since the Barov family left. Suddenly, Duke was pushed to the top of the waves by Kalia's words. Ha! Ha ha! Wait. Something was wrong. That's right, Duke was ready to make his move. He had waited for so long just so that when Terena's drama reached its climax, he would kick Terenas from the clouds of luck he had been dreaming of, and send him straight to hell. The problem was in Duque's plan, Princess Kalia was not part of it. No, It should be said that helping the princess out of her predicament was just a convenience. That night, Duque did it purely because the system elf had told him that Princess Kalia is looking at you from the balcony of the palace. So Duque wanted to give Tarinas a hard time. Now, because of Princess Kalia's words, the kings interpreted that the princess had an affair with Duque. If that was the case, everything could be explained. Why wasn't Princess Pristo tempted by the marshal at all? Why was the princess prepared to counterattack with Duque's magic rose when Presto took out the ice rose sculpture? Why did the meek princess dare to go against the will of King Tarinas? It was all because they had Duque as their backer. Even if the kings were not shameless at this moment, everyone's soul of gossip began to awaken, and it began to burn fiercely. Duque was embarrassed, especially when he felt Aurelia's gaze on him. He finally understood why Aurelia had said that her jealousy was as big as Fengxing Lake. How could it not be big? His lover was entangled with the princess of the strongest human kingdom. If it was true love, maybe Aurelia would let him go. But it was a melodramatic entanglement without any feelings. It could only be used by bards to write poems and sing plays. But it was actually useless. Ahem. Legolas coughed softly. Ugh. Why did it have to be time to go on stage? Duque looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, speechlessly leaving a crocodile tear made of air. At this moment, Duque was possessed by Best Actor. At this moment, Duque was holding a non-existent little golden man in his left hand. He was like an actor who was about to step onto the podium and say that he had won the Best Actor award. He slowly stood up, and Duke's voice, which was excessively young but familiar to all kings, sounded again. I'm sorry, Your Majesty Menethil. I firmly oppose Her Highness Kalia marrying the Lord of Presto. Wow. The two dwarven kings exclaimed. Explosive. Too explosive. Were they going to stage a scene where the future king of Alterax's love was snatched away? Would this be the victory of a young couple who had pledged themselves to each other? Or would it end with the complete victory of Tarinas, the old king who represented the evil forces? The king's spirit of gossip was burning brighter and brighter. What is your reason? Tarinas said through gritted teeth. First, please allow me and my servant to present Princess Kalia with a few gifts. Tarinas nodded in the end. He could see the joy in his daughter's expression. But he still did not understand why the situation had changed so drastically. Why was Duke still stubbornly fighting with him for the sake of the Bearer family's daughter? But in the next moment, he seemed to be on good terms with his daughter, and seemed to want to recognize him as his father-in-law. What about Davor Pristo, the perfect chess piece? Duque left the stage, followed by Legolas, Sala, Goss, and the bronze-skinned elf. The kings had been wondering about this strange combination ever since Lang and Anduin brought them in. After all, the people they brought in were basically their trusted aides, such as Grand Dukes and so on. Only Lang and Anduin had unfamiliar guards. Duque brought a few elven guards with him. This combination was as strange as it could get. Of course, the one who was even more shocked was the Lord of Pristo. He seemed to have foreseen that Duque's appearance was a slap to his face. No matter how well-mannered he was, he would not hold back his hostility towards Duque. Duque glared back at him. However, Duque paid more attention to Princess Kalia. Duque, are you finally willing to stand up? Princess Kalia bit her lip, and unconsciously played with her fingers on her abdomen. Yes, I'm here as promised, Duque answered confidently. You won't disappoint me, right? Of course not. The two of them seemed to be speaking in riddles, which made the kings even more anxious. Hey, Duque, show old Tarinas what tricks you have. Mag's jeering made Tarina's face turn even darker. At this time, Duque had already arrived between Kalia and the Lord of Pristo. He directly turned his back to the Lord of Pristo, who had already stood up. From Kalia's perspective, the shadow of the taller and bullier Pristo's body was enough to cover the whole of Duque. Duque ignored her, and instead stepped forward to hold Princess Kalia's hand tightly. He then took a deep breath and shouted to Tarinas, the reason I object to their union is, Lord Pristo is the wing of death. As soon as he finished speaking, Duque pulled Princess Kalia and flew out with flash. Almost at the same time, the brightest light shone behind them. Chapter 604. Huh. What? Since ancient times, there was no classic romance film without a love triangle. But wasn't the style changing too quickly? Even if it was to steal someone's love and turn it into hatred, shouldn't two men draw a line and set a date before dueling? Why did they suddenly attack? How did a romance film suddenly turn into a horror film? The four guards beside Duque, who seemed to be here to deliver gifts, suddenly opened the box, and a strong flash burst out from the box. The light from these flash bombs was controlled by the funnel-like reflective shield, and all of them shot at Lord Pristo's face, blinding him for at least a moment. Half of the kings were dumbfounded. Why was it half? Because the other half of the kings and their followers, who were on good terms with Duque, all heard Aurelia's anxious whisper of "win" before they attacked. Danger! Pristo is the wings of death. This sentence was stuck half a second before Duque finished speaking. Dalen Magni Kale that's, and the others were very good at fighting. For these fellows who had stepped into the realm of heroes, half a second was enough. Almost at the same time, Dalen pulled out his machete, Magni and the Muradin brothers activated Avatar, and Kale, that's waved his hand to cover himself with 3 magic shields. Not to mention Lang and Anduin, who were already prepared. Duque's appearance itself was the biggest signal. Almost at the moment when Duque said the words "wings of death," Aurelia had already grabbed Lang's collar with one hand and Anduin with the other. With the help of the power of Storm, they rushed out of the throne room in less than half a second. In the arena, the most crucial arena, the four fellows who had deliberately changed their appearances had finally revealed their true forms. The first was Sala, the elven druid who had her eyes closed all this time. When she suddenly opened her eyes, 2 extremely strange rays of light shot out from her eyes, directly into Lord Presto's body. Lord Presto's tall and sturdy body trembled on the spot. On the other side was Legolas. In a thousandth of a second, the standard high elf eyes turned the color of molten gold, and 2 vertical pupils that resembled lava balls appeared. Slender red scales appeared on her forehead like lightning. The back of his head, which was originally empty, had many hard, long and sharp horns as if by magic. Her robe suddenly opened up, revealing a large piece of thick red scale armor. His arms suddenly lengthened and thickened, and a pair of incomparably sharp claws leapt out. He struck out with both his claws at Presto, who was in the middle of the battlefield. Not only her, but the other 2 guards also attacked at the same time. The bronze-skinned guy held a long-handled warhammer with a head like a crab's leg, and smashed it down. The blue-haired one suddenly pulled out a magnificent staff, and with a wave of his hand, a huge blue light shield appeared in front of all the kings. Duque had just carried Princess Kalia, who had turned pale, into a standard princess carry, and hid within the protection of the light shield. Everything actually happened in half a second. However, the situation changed too quickly, and no one could really control the situation. At this moment, the dumbfounded Lord Presto, or rather, the wing of death Nesario, who had been ambushed, was finally hit. At the last moment, at the most critical moment when he was about to be killed, Nesario suddenly came to his senses. Countless years of accumulated combat experience and combat instincts allowed him to twist his body. This allowed him to avoid the greatest crisis of death. He had only avoided instant death. After all, the ones who ambushed him were the life-giver Alexstrasza, the Queen of Dreams Isra, the King of Time Nasdormu, and the King of Magic Malygos, the 4 dragon aspects that had recovered their strength. It had to be said that Nesario's ultimate transformation spell was at the peak of perfection. He completely suppressed his power and transformed into a human that no one had seen before, isolating all possible leakage of the dragon aura, and even soul fluctuations. Apart from refusing to accept any magical detection, even if Alexstrasza and Isra were to examine him in front of him, they would not be able to detect that he was the wing of death. Unfortunately, from the moment he heard the name Dwar Presto, the evil transmigrator Duque already knew that he was Nesario. That's right, Nesario had reached the limit of this disguise game. But Duque had cheated. He directly bypassed all the appearances and processes, and reached the result. It was not that Nesario was not alert to Duque's 4 guards, But the problem was that the 4 dragon kings had used the same ultimate transformation spell under Duque's instigation. They had changed their appearance and aura. In the eyes of all the mortals, the 4 of them were just 4 blonde high elves. Unless Nesario dared to use Antonida's level of detection magic in front of everyone, he would never be able to tell that the 4 of them had used almost the same magic that he had used to reject detection. Hesitation, disbelief, and Nesario's pride in his ability to conceal himself had finally caused him to be ambushed. That's right. He had escaped the fate of being killed in seconds. This did not mean that he had escaped the sneak attack of the 4 dragon kings. Maligo's magic shield was not just for protection. This magic also turned into thousands of tiny magic needles on the ground at the same time, piercing into Nesario's legs. If Nesario was a standard dragon, this bit of damage would not even be able to pierce through his dragon skin. The problem was that he was in the human form with the lowest defense. In an instant, countless needle-sized lines of blood appeared on his legs. Nozdorma's warhammer smashed into Nesario's tilted head. He did not use all of his strength, but 70% of its power caused half of Nesario's head to cave in slightly from the corner of his left eyebrow to his temple. The most serious injury that Nesario suffered was Alexstras's claws. One of her claws tore apart the right side of his lower abdomen. The other claw completely penetrated his left lung, and 5 sharp dragon claws directly came out of his left chest. Dripping blood stained the 5 sharp claws. If Nesario was just a slightly stronger mortal creature, such an injury would be enough to put him on the countdown to death. But he was not. He was the wing of death, Nesario, the former guardian of the earth. Since the ancient war 10,000 years ago, it was once the strongest giant dragon. Roar! At the same time, several loud dragon roars exploded in the throne room. Among them, Nethario's shrill and tragic roar was the most terrifying. Chapter 605. Several ferocious dragon roars reverberated through the air, causing every piece of glass in the throne room to shatter. The shards of glass shot out along with the violent air currents, killing and injuring many attendants and guards outside. This was not a dragon's breath, nor was it a bomb, but it was many times more terrifying than a mage's pyroblast. The long roars penetrated the deepest part of everyone's soul, reminding them of a legend that had almost been completely forgotten by the world. 10,000 years ago, that was the era of the dragons. Every creature that walked on the ground could be the prey of the dragons. Everything in the mortal world had to crawl under the wings of the dragons, afraid that they would attract the attention of the dragons and get themselves killed. Outside the throne room, there was still the sound of drums and music. The people who were celebrating the day of triumph did not disperse, even after the triumphant procession had left the main road and started to parade around the city. This was because the kingdom of Lordaeron had also invited a large number of performers, strange clowns, costume dancers, and all kinds of bands. Just a few seconds ago, even though it was early winter, the entire Lordaeron city was still immersed in a warm atmosphere. At this moment, the terrifying dragon roar that suddenly appeared broke all of this. The veterans who had just retreated from the front lines were fine. After facing the Crimson Dragon Legion's attacks day and night, almost all of them had developed a strong heart. The citizens of Lordaeron, who had never seen a dragon, were in big trouble. Because of fear, many people's hearts contracted due to excessive nervousness. Under sudden cardiac arrest, blood supply temporarily stopped, and everything in their field of vision turned pitch black. Under extreme fear, nearly 30% of them fainted just like that. Some unlucky people even fell from the balcony. They could not be blamed. The shocking dragon might of the 5 great dragon kings was not something mortals could resist. For a moment, the entire Lordaeron city was in a mess. In fact, the throne room was also in a mess. Under the gaze of all the kings, the tall and burly Davar Priester suddenly released a flaming shockwave. This was not a simple shockwave. It contained extremely high energy, and the other dragon kings did not dare to face it head-on. Or rather, which of these ultimate Azeroth masters who had lived for countless years did not have a few trump cards that could save their lives. He was unable to determine what this move was all about. He could only be sure that this was a terrifying skill that even the 4 great dragon kings could only avoid. After shaking off Alexstrasza and Nosdormu, he began to transform. In front of every single king, Presto's head turned into a miniature pitch-black dragon head. A pair of wings grew larger and larger on his back, while his limbs grew thicker and thicker. His once white and smooth skin was now covered in a layer of cuticle. Not only him, but the other 4 dragon kings also transformed at the same time. It grew larger and larger, more and more terrifying. In just a few moments, it had surpassed the range that a human's field of vision could accommodate at close range. It was foreseeable that in less than 5 seconds, the entire magnificent throne room would be burst apart by the 5 terrifyingly large ancient dragons. Let's go! It was unknown how Duque cast the spell, but the walls in the 4 directions of the hall were suddenly pierced by 4 huge icicles. These 4 completely hollow icicles were like a giant ice slide that led straight to the royal garden outside the hall. Dalen Magni and the rest jumped into the ice slide without hesitation and escaped smoothly. Jean, Salas, and Antonidas hesitated for a moment before sliding out with their people. Only Terina's things had changed too quickly. Even now, he still could not believe his eyes. Oh my God! What have I done? That's right. The nobles in the country were seething with resentment. Their territories had been burned to the ground, and the capital had almost been conquered. They had formed the alliance, but they did not have the kind of influence that they had. In order to make up for all this, Terina's did not hesitate to offend the other alliance to take over Alterac. He even risked opposition from half of the alliance to use his authority as the alliance master to impeach an important minister of another country who had never truly betrayed the alliance. And then what did he gain? His beloved daughter did not listen to him, and actually joined forces with Duque, whom he had failed to recruit. The lord that he trusted completely and was willing to promote as the king of Alterac was actually the infamous Deathwing Nesario, who was proven to be the one who caused the Red Dragon army to side with the orcs. That was Neltharion. For tens of thousands of years, he had caused countless deaths and destruction, and destroyed countless cities. He was one of the most evil beings in the world of human scholars, historians, and bards on countless occasions. Terina's could not imagine how the people would react when they found out that they were almost used by Deathwing, and that they had helped Deathwing become the king of Alterac. No. Today's losses might be great. Even if he had to pay a higher price, he had to shut the mouths of the various kings as soon as possible. Otherwise, if he were to be accused of being in cahoots with Deathwing, he would not be able to hold his position as the alliance master. Yes, I am also a victim of Deathwing's scheme. When Terina's finally completed the great achievement of plan completion, he suddenly realized that the plan he had just completed could be thrown into the gutter. Because the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza hit Nesario with her dragon tail. And when Nesario was about to rise into the sky, the Red Dragon Queen, who did not seem to know Terina's suffering, shouted in the human language, "Nesario, your end is here. Don't think that we won't be able to find you just because you have become the Lord of Presto and hide under Menethil's protection." The roar was so loud and clear. At this moment, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians who had gathered in Lordaeron for the victory ceremony all heard it. Wow! King Menethil actually. No one dared to believe their ears, but the behemoth that was almost half the size of a town in the sky did exist. The flames under its wings were like a cloud of fire, and the corrosive liquid that was fanned out when the giant wings flapped was like a drizzle of stars. They were obviously inconspicuous droplets of liquid, but they were extremely corrosive. When these fine droplets were sprinkled on the palace below, they easily corroded the tiles, walls, statues, and ground, not to mention humans. Any creature that came into contact with a little bit of it would be instantly corroded, along with their armor, skin, and muscles. Chapter 606. Just a few flaps of the wings of death had caused the entire Lordaeron palace to fall into destruction. This was the result of Malygos following Duque's instructions to prevent the battle from spreading too far. He tried to use a huge ring-shaped wind wall to lock the battle in the sky above the palace. If not for Malygos, half of Lordaeron would have instantly turned into hell. No, I didn't do it. Tyrrheus had a mental breakdown. He could not imagine how the people of Lordaeron, or even the entire human world, would scold him after the sun rose tomorrow. In his daze, he seemed to hear countless voices saying, "Look, Tyrrheus, that blind idiot, actually wants to put the most evil black dragon on the noble throne." No, no, no. The scepter in Tyrrheus' hand had already fallen to the ground. He opened his arms and waved them around, completely ignoring the countless pieces of rubble raining down from the top of the throne hall. Suddenly, he was held down by Mograine and Abendis, one on the left and one on the right. "Your Majesty, run." It had to be said that the High Lord Mograine was an extremely loyal subject. He did not lack loyalty, courage, or leadership. It was only at this moment that Tyrrheus suddenly came back to his senses and felt a surge of warmth in his heart. But the next moment, when he realized that he had to rely on Duque's ice slide to escape, he lost control of his emotions again. "No, I don't want to use Duque's things." Yes, he already hated Duque. It was Duque who argued with him. It was Duque who did not let him have it easy. It was Duque who did not inform him that Presto was actually Nesario. Yes, in a sense he had guessed correctly. But that, again, like, what? His Radiant Moon Mage guards had become useless because of the Blue Dragon King's absolute control of the surrounding magical elements. Other than Duque, whom Malygos had specially opened the back door for, all the mages in the entire palace had become weak chickens. Mograine and Abendis were not gods, and they did not have the holy light to activate, Holy Shield. Other than Duque, there was no other way out. If you have the ability, don't use it. Mograine and Tiramisu didn't care. They grabbed Tyrrheus and jumped down. Perhaps because of a certain person's dark heart, this ice skating path was a little thorny. Just as he was about to reach the garden, the great King Tyrrheus Menethil's robe was torn apart, and he could only scurry away with his bare buttocks. On the other side, the 4 dragon kings that followed Nesario into the sky had already become extremely huge. Their gigantic bodies cast a shadow from the sky that covered 2 to 3 city blocks. Red, green, blue, and bronze, the 4-colored dragon bodies shone brightly under the dazzling sunlight. Each dragon was shrouded in a halo of sunlight. The halos with a holy aura seemed to declare the supreme majesty of the world of Azeroth's guardian dragons. Alexstrasza, who was in the lead, raised her head and stared at the trembling black dragon in the sky with her golden yellow pupils that were like lava flames. She could clearly see the anger and fear in the eyes of this cunning, cruel, and traitorous black dragon. She was not in a hurry after surrounding her old opponent. She slowly and elegantly spread her huge wings, dispersing all the dust and debris that were brought up when she broke through the roof of the throne hall. Deathwing's condition was already very bad, due to the serious injury he had suffered in his human form. This injury was directly reflected in his dragon form. One of Nesario's left eyes could no longer open, the left side of his head had a slight sense of collapse, and a horn on the upper left had disappeared. Similarly, there was a huge wound on the left side of his chest and the right side of his abdomen. The scales on that area had all disappeared. The dragon skin was flipped open, and the muscles were rolled back. One could even see flames that did not belong to him rolling around in the wound. That was the Red Dragon Queen's flame of life. For most creatures, it was a great tonic, but for Neltharion, it was the most potent poison. At this moment, Nesario's crazy red eyes no longer had the arrogance of the king of the world. Instead, he had the timidity of a thief who was afraid of being beaten to death after being caught. Why? Why are you able to sense my existence? My plan should have been perfect. My disguise should have been perfect. Why? Why? Is it really that kid named Duque? Nesario roared in shock and anger. Ha 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 ha. You underestimate me too much, Nesario. The Bronze Dragon King, Nozdormu, grinned loudly. His mouth, which was made of sand, was not sharp, and looked as ridiculous as a sculpture. However, The power of time that flowed through his mouth was not funny at all. You. Of all the things you shouldn't have done, you shouldn't have become a human. This has reduced the difficulty of peeping into your future. I happened to see all of this. Ha ha ha. Anyway, Duque had repeatedly told him not to betray him, and even made up this excuse for Nozdormu. Nozdormu went with the flow, and pretended to be pretentious. Damn it. How did I bump into it? Nesario felt that he was completely black. He was very clear about the strength of his old brother. Nozdormu would not often peep into the future, because it was very laborious, and required him to pay some kind of price. He now regarded this as Nozdormu peeking into countless fragments of the future. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack to see what he had done. If this was not black, what was it? Nesario, repent for your sins. Malygos, who hated Nesario the most, let out the loudest roar of anger since his appearance. When there was no need to protect the weak humans, that was when Malygos would really go all out. It wasn't that Nesario hadn't thought about whether he could take advantage of Malygos, not launching a sneak attack this time, and instead covering for the human kings. When he saw Malygos' eyes, which were still filled with anger and hatred, he immediately knew that Malygos had done this because of some agreement. But now Malygos had no scruples. If he used humans as a cover, some people might feel the heartache, but Malygos would definitely not hesitate to kill him along with the ant-like humans below him. Nesario's brain was about to crash. Even when he was at his peak, he couldn't defeat his 4 brothers and sisters who had recovered their strength, let alone him who was already injured. Now he was even more injured. If he hadn't been injured, he wouldn't have had so much time to pretend to be a human and attempt to overthrow the alliance. He looked at the 4 dragon aspects that were in perfect formation, waiting to be slaughtered by the dragon aspects. Nesario was in despair. What should I do? What should I do? Chapter 607. The 5 dragon aspects fought against each other for tens of thousands of years, due to the enmity between good and evil. This was a scene that ordinary people might not even get to see once in their lives. If not for the fact that they were worried that it would harm themselves, it would definitely be an extremely relaxing scene for the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians below. Unfortunately, this was not an IMAX movie, and there was no place for the popcorn-eating crowd to sit and watch the show. The battle between the 5 ancient dragon kings in the sky could easily drop anything, such as scales or corrosive secretions from the body of the dragon of death. If they were hit or affected, it would be a disaster. For a moment, the entire Lordaeron city was in chaos. Duque had tricked Wings of Death and Tyrannus. If he did not run away, then he would be an idiot. Of course, the situation now was a little tricky, because he was carrying Princess Kalia Minithil in his arms. She was wearing a snow-white gauze dress that looked almost like a wedding gown, and a pair of white jade balls under the protection of a low-cut top trembled under his eyes. Sob, sob, sob. I, Duque, am no longer that little virgin who only fantasized about 10 terabytes romantic action movies. I've eaten meat. Please, princess, don't tempt me, okay? Ever since I lost my moral integrity as Mediv, I haven't been able to maintain it. Who knew that the princess did not seem to hear his thoughts at all? She wrapped her arms around his neck, as if to make it easier for Duque. But her breasts were getting closer. Damn it. Damn it. Flash was not a spell that could be used casually. It was a spell that could disintegrate a person into elemental particles, and then reassemble them from 20 yards away. Although it was perfect, it would stop when it encountered an obstacle. However, the air was filled with flying rubble, and using Flash would cost him his life in minutes. Duque could only activate his ice shield, blow away the stones that came out of nowhere, and run with the princess in his arms. Duque, you've finally come to pick me up. It's just like what I've seen in my dreams countless times. Wait a minute. What's with this affectionate dialogue? Although you didn't ride a white horse, you saved me from the hands of an evil dragon. You are indeed my destined knight. Although you're not wrong. But I'm really just passing by, you understand? But in every knight and princess novel, There will always be a happy ending, right? What are you going to do next? Father is a prideful person. He said that I'm not allowed to marry anyone except for Presto. If that's the case, I'll definitely be imprisoned in Lord Darren's palace for the rest of my life. Duque shuddered. He crossed a corridor filled with the corpses of guards and quickly turned into a storeroom. He closed the door, not letting Kalia see the guards outside who were scared to death by the dragon's might. As Duque put down Princess's leg, he panted heavily and thought to himself, "Damn it! I really have to train my body when I go back this time." This was the nth time Duque had sworn to exercise. Please ignore the sentence above. Duque spoke. Okay, Princess Kalia. Please call me Kalia. The princess was unexpectedly persistent on this matter. At the same time, her arms did not let go of Duque's neck. Their faces were still very close. Okay, Kalia, I understand your situation. Since I promised to give you freedom, I will definitely do it. Duque strived to be a gentleman, even if he knew from the bottom of his heart that he was just a hypocrite at this moment. A hypocrite is a hypocrite. There were always some beautiful things in the world that people couldn't bear to destroy, such as Princess Kalia's pure beauty. How are you going to give me freedom? Princess Kalia's clear blue eyes showed hope and a smile. Duque quickly said, I've already calculated the extent of damage caused by Deathwing's acid. I need you to provide something that can prove your identity. I will throw it into a ball of acid and fake evidence that you are dead. At the same time, I will open a portal and send you directly to a safe place. Kalia tilted her head. She quickly made a decision. First, she took off her sapphire earrings, then the headdress on her forehead, followed by the sapphire necklace on her chest. Finally, she pulled on the ropes around her waist, and something happened that left Duke dumbfounded. Princess Kalia's tight waistband, along with her gorgeous white muslin dress, was taken off in front of Duque. Of course, it wasn't that there was nothing under the long dress. It was just a white bra that perfectly showed the shape of her chest, white panties, and white stockings with suspenders. All of this stunned Duque. This was comparable to the underwear models of Victoria's Secret before Duque traveled to this world. In fact, Princess Kalia's figure was not inferior to those supermodels at all. Duque swallowed his saliva. Oh my God! Princess, don't you know what it means to provoke others into committing a crime? I'm telling you, don't tease me anymore. I don't have very high moral integrity. I might really push you down. 2 seconds later, Duque retreated in defeat. Because he was shocked to find that this dignified Princess Royal of Lord Darren really had no concept of defense. Even though she was shy about the man's gaze, in her completely clear eyes, she did not even consider the possibility of being dragged by him to play coquetry. She trusted Duque completely. Duque, is there anything I can wear? Duque bared his teeth and threw his mage robe to Kalia from the storage space. Mage robes were good. Most mage robes didn't discriminate between men and women at all. They could just be put on. Kalia quickly put it on. What do we do now? Wait for me to open the door. Open the door. Kalia immediately saw that Duque had actually opened a portal in the small storage space. Isn't there only designated places in Lord Darren that can open portals? Kalia was puzzled. Those low-level magic barriers have long been dismantled by Maligos, the king of magic. Oh, I see. Without saying anything more, Kalia subconsciously hugged Duque again and began her first trip to the portal in her life. 2 minutes later, the captain of the Lord Darren Palace Guards, who was leading a team of 30 royal guards in the palace, frantically looking for Tarina's or Princess Kalia, was pleasantly surprised to see Duque rushing towards him with Princess Kalia in his arms. Your Highness Kalia. Molev hurried over. Molev. The princess let out a cry of surprise. Duque, give me to him. He is our captain of the palace guards. Chapter 608. Duque breathed heavily and put the princess down. That's great. I'll leave the princess to you. I still need to make sure His Majesty Lang is safe. Duque did not waste any time and handed the princess over to Molev. Thank you, Duke Marcus. I'll take care of the princess. However, less than 30 seconds after they separated, something unexpected happened. Boom! A magic bombardment fell from the sky and hit the corridor of the palace. What followed was a terrifying shriek of death. No! Molev turned around in horror. He and more than 15 guards had witnessed this tragic scene. Princess Kalia didn't even have the chance to scream before she was hit by the acid of the wings of death. In an instant, not even her bones were left. Molev tried to pull the princess away at the last moment, but all he could do was pull the princess's white dress. No, 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 no. Molev was furious. He tried to pull the princess out of the acid that had turned half of his subordinates and the princess into an unknown substance, but he was held back by his subordinates. Let me go. Let me go. I'm guilty. I'm guilty. The princess is dead. What's the point of me being the captain of the guards? Just let me die. Molev pulled out his sword and wanted to commit suicide. His subordinates stopped him. No, sir, you are the captain of the guards. You have the duty to report this to His Majesty. Didn't you say that you gave your life to the Menethil royal family? It is his right to decide how you die. You have no right to commit suicide. No. The captain of the guards, who had been through countless hardships and had always been loyal to the Lordaeron royal family, shed tears of regret. He could not imagine what kind of expression His Majesty Tyrrhena's would have when he heard the news. At the same time, far away in the western wilderness of the southern continent, a beautiful golden-haired girl looked at the vast fields. She took a deep breath of the thick, earthy scent of the winter fields. She puffed out her chest and sucked in her stomach. She tilted her head back and opened her arms, letting the cold wind blow through her hair. She let out a heartfelt gasp of admiration. Wow, so beautiful! Is this the scenery outside? Is this the air of freedom? The girl's beautiful blue eyes greedily absorbed everything in her vision into her mind. In the eyes of countless ordinary people, things that were incomparably simple and ordinary were so rare and fresh in the eyes of the young girl. Like a canary that broke free from its cage, she sang and cheered happily in this world. After taking off her luxurious high heels, the young lady stuck her slender and perfect jade-like feet into the ice-cold soil. She kicked away the thin snow that covered the field and used her toes to pick out pieces of black soil. Then, just like that, she danced around the field in the most elegant manner. This beautiful girl was naturally Princess Kalia. Duque used the true mirror image spell to perfectly imitate the princess and let a non-existent magic dummy wear the princess clothes. In the eyes of the world, the beautiful Kalia Menethil was already gone. Duque didn't disturb the excited Kalia. He let her party on the field. Anyone who stayed in a palace that seemed huge, but was actually very small, or in a cage for 16 years would feel extremely depressed and depressed. This feeling of spiritual sublimation from breaking free from the cage was something that no outsider could understand. The air of freedom. Because she was too happy. Princess Kalia spun faster and faster. Because the mage robe didn't have any straps, the whole robe was like a long skirt, swaying at high speed. The white stockings and that pair of beautiful legs were not bad. Duque subconsciously covered his nose. Was this a sign that he was going to have a nosebleed? No. I said I won't be a beast. Duque rubbed his eyebrows. Looking at Kalia's delicate and pure face, his restless heart calmed down. What a magical girl. At this time, the crazy Kalia finally realized that she seemed to have lost her composure. She subconsciously lifted the hem of the mage robe like a skirt and trotted towards Duque. Sorry. I'm too excited. I feel like I can see the outside world. I'm willing to die. Duque smiled sincerely. Kalia, don't joke. Since I promised you freedom, you will naturally have a lot of time to see the world. Kalia suddenly realized something, and her mood became a little down. If I do this, will it bring you and my father a lot of trouble? Besides, when the Rotterdam Kingdom was in trouble, I felt really bad for running out alone like this. I'm not in trouble. I've perfectly killed you and Lordaeron. There won't be any evidence that I kidnapped or murdered you. As for your father, His Majesty Tyrrhena's, I want to say that everyone must be responsible for their own actions. Responsible? Kalia widened her eyes. which were so pure that there was not a trace of impurity in them, and blinked. Yes, as the leader of the Lordaeron alliance, after signing the Equal Alliance Treaty, he coveted the alliance's land. This is a true blasphemy to the name of the alliance. Perhaps the Alterac king and nobles are guilty, but the people of Alterac are not. Lordaeron and Alterac are not enemies, but brothers of the same origin. I am ashamed of His Majesty Tyrrhena's for doing this. At this point Duque lowered her head. I have asked the Blue Dragon King Maligos to ensure the safety of the citizens of Lordaeron as much as possible, but there will always be losses. This is not my fault, nor yours or anyone else's. From the day His Majesty Tyrrhena's coveted Alterac's land and introduced the wings of death, Nesario, this was the destined outcome. If I hadn't discovered Nesario early and found the 4 dragon kings to kill him, Lordaeron would have been devoured by Nesario. Kalia shuddered. Although she was inexperienced, she could not imagine what would happen to the entire Rotterdam, and even the entire alliance, if she were to marry Presto. No, if she were to marry Nesario in name. Kalia thought for a while and finally accepted this reality. Then what should I do next? Do I need to hide in your Corazon first? No, since I promised you freedom, I won't. I will fulfill my promise. Please allow me to introduce you to your companions, who will be accompanying you on your adventures around the world in the coming days. Duque bowed elegantly. Then, a few women appeared from behind the hill. They were a maid, a ranger, and an armored paladin. Chapter 609. Princess Kalia's sexy little mouth opened into an O shape. Although she had complete trust in Duque, but in her imagination, being able to hide outside the palace under Duque's protection was already the greatest happiness. Who would have thought that there would be something even better than happiness? Duque had actually fulfilled her wish without any discount. The first girl dressed as a maid stepped forward. She gave Kalia a very standard maid's salute. She had short black hair that was parted 3 to 7 times, and a beautiful yet slightly immature face. Although she was dressed in a typical black maid's outfit with white edges, her steps were very vigorous, without the slightest hint of a maid's style. Hello, Princess Kalia. I am Vanessa Van Cleef. I was originally Sir Marcus's exclusive maid, but now my cruel master thinks that I am a hindrance and abandoned me. I request your highness to take me in. Duque face-bombed. This little maid was really worrisome. Kalia was dumbfounded. Abandoned a maid? What is this? Duque smiled bitterly. Don't listen to Vanessa's nonsense. Her father is an important minister under me, and he entrusted her to me. But I found out that she has an excellent talent as a thief. Keeping her by my side as a maid would be a waste of her talent, so it is better to let her go out and gain experience. In a few years, first, when she grows up, and second, when she has experience, I will be of great use to her. Humph. That's more like it. Vanessa's little nose was raised to the sky. After saying that, she unexpectedly ignored Duque and grabbed Princess Kalia's hand. Hey, Sister Kalia. I heard that you want to give up your identity as a princess and travel the continent as an ordinary person. Is that true? Of course. Kalia did not hesitate. Then later, to avoid exposing my identity, I will only call you by your name and a pseudonym. Vanessa, who was a little scheming, seized the opportunity. No problem. Kalia didn't know that she had fallen into a trap, and was still very happy because of the other party's kindness. Always hearing the words Your Highness always made her uncomfortable. Duque continued. This ranger is Lilith Windrunner, the youngest sister of the Windrunner family. Although she looked like this, she was actually more than 300 years old. She had the unparalleled talent of the Windrunner family, but before she could step into the realm of heroes, her limelight was stolen by her 3 sisters during the battle at the Dark Portal. In fact, her kill record can be ranked in the top 20 in the Alliance. Kalia's mouth opened wider. Don't underestimate the top 20. It also depended on who was in the top 10. Duque, the publicly acknowledged nemesis of the orcs, was ranked number 1. Below them were the 3 Windrunner sisters and Antonidas, who was active in the Silverpine Forest battlefield. Next was a group of butcher princes. At that time, there was Anduin Lothar of Quel Zarim, and then there was Uther and the others who were known as the 5 Silver Saints, after the charge of the 12 horsemen. Below them were Highlord Mograine, Abendis, Dalen Proudmoore, Danath Trollbane, Curdran Wildhammer, and the 3 Bronzebeard brothers of Ironforge. These were fierce men, who had shown extraordinary results during the war. If it wasn't for the fact that these guys in front of her were too fierce, and left too deep an impression, she would definitely have the title of Alliance Hero. Even so, Lilith managed to occupy the top 20 without anyone noticing. The dignified princess of Lordaeron immediately trotted over like a fan, pulling Lilith's hand and asking questions. After the excitement subsided with great difficulty, Kalia realized that there was a third companion here. Neither she nor Duque minded Kalia's loss of composure. Duque said, "This is Lady Riadaline. She was originally a priest of the Holy Light just like you. However, after the war that just ended, she was a little agitated. She then became the disciple of my subordinate, Gavinrad Misfortune, and became a holy knight. She is a very good vanguard. She will also follow you out to gain experience." Kalia's eyes immediately sparkled again. Her pure and unadorned personality easily won Riadaline's favor. Duque also sighed. The 3 companions he had painstakingly arranged this time all had great backgrounds. In the original history, Vanessa would have become a boss. Lilith's original form, Riras, had died, but now she had made a name for herself. The last one, Riadaline, was even more impressive. Duque knew very well that it was the fault of the world shift. Riadaline was originally a high elven priest who believed in the holy light. Her parents were killed by the Amani trolls, and she was raised by her mentor, the high-ranking priest Vonderal. In the war that had just ended, the green-skinned orcs and trolls were like a rampant plague that swept through the entire Long Song forest like a tide. The magnificent armor and shields of the high elves were as thin as paper in front of the brute force of the orcs. The vanguard of the elves was easily destroyed by the muscular army of orcs, ogres, and goblins. Riadaline watched helplessly as her companions were killed by the strong orcs. In this cruel war that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of elves, Riadaline began to question her unwavering belief in the holy light. Her holy light could only heal the soldiers who retreated from the battlefield, but could not resist the heavy hammers and axes of the orcs, nor could it resist the crazy magic bombardment of the 2-headed ogre mages. If the holy light really protected the high elves, why did the elves lose so badly? At the most critical stage of the war, she even picked up a spiked mace and charged at the orcs. However, the moment she charged, she was easily defeated by an orc laborer who was seen as the weakest. It was only because her comrades dragged her back that she managed to escape. She watched angrily as Orgrim left Kuel Salis with a mocking victory, and countless ogres, who had been strengthened by the storm altar. The home that the elves were so proud of had become a wasteland burned to ashes. At this time, she saw Gavinrad appear. This profession that perfectly combined the holy light and combat deeply touched her heart. In the eyes of the elves in this era, becoming a holy knight was a complete betrayal, but she did not care. She bid farewell to her good friend Theron, and became Gavinrad's disciple. With Duque's approval and protection, she became a holy knight trainee. According to Duque, after a few months of learning, it was time for her to train. Only Duque knew, damn it, I tricked the leader of the Blood Elves Blood Knights from the future generation. Thanks to the great offset. In the end, he gave Kalia a magic mask that could turn a little beauty into a village girl, and gave Riadaline a magic locator and communication tool. Everything was done. All right, I suggest that you travel to Stranglethorn Vale first. Call me if there's any danger. With Kalia's problem solved, Duque turned his attention to the north. Chapter 610. Nethario, are you dead? If you're not dead, just snort. Roar. You're not qualified. You really don't know how to cooperate. Can't you practice the lying dead swordsmanship properly? Are you really going to lie down for me to see? Also, I told you to snort, not roar. Roar. Netherio's voice came from the sky. It was clearly filled with pain and anger. On an empty balcony in Rotterdam, Duque, who looked like a bystander, but was actually the culprit, tasted the delicacies left behind by his host without any restraint. Well, the great noble of Rotterdam and his servant were so scared that they hid in the basement. They had no idea that their balcony had been occupied by a shameless traitor. As Duke sat with his legs crossed, eating the snacks and drinking the warm wine, a melodious voice like that of an oriole suddenly came from behind him. Yo, you demolished someone's palace, and you still have the nerve to stay here and have fun. Duque glanced back. Yes. The first thing that entered his eyes was the mermaid line on her abdomen that was still incomparably clear on her tights. Above that was naturally the pair of majestic hydral peaks. And further above that was, of course, the beautiful face that seemed to be angry. Hey Aurelia, don't spout nonsense. It was Deathwing who demolished the Palace of Rotterdam. If Tyrrhenus isn't satisfied, he can send the palace repair bill to Neltharion. Pfft. Aurelia was really amused by Duque. She put her hands on her hips and laughed. When she finally finished laughing, she walked over and sat gracefully on the red velvet sofa beside Duque. When she did not show her wild side, Aurelia was a typical noble lady. Unfortunately, the Windrunner's demeanor only lasted for 3 seconds. Her temperament was like the wind in her bones, causing her to quickly reveal her true colors. Her bright smile carried a hint of ridicule. Duque, you're really willing? It's obviously a good opportunity to hide a mistress with the princess, as you said. TSK. Duque righteously recalled Princess Kalia's graceful female body in her underwear, and said in a deep voice, not every kind of love is called possession. Sometimes appreciating and letting go is also a good way to praise beauty. You can choose not to believe me, but your sister Lilith is by Kalia's side. All right, I'm not really jealous. Don't treat me as such a petty woman, okay? I know you're the real hero of the alliance. After saying that, Aurelia didn't care if there were still people looking at them, and directly gave Duque a hot kiss. Yes, that's more like it. After the kiss, Aurelia returned to the sofa and muttered in a low voice, even an old lady like me who has seen through the world is infatuated with you. I'm afraid that little girl Kalia will love you even more after she goes out. What? Duque didn't hear it. Nothing. I'm just talking to myself. Why isn't Nesario dead yet? Aurelia quickly diverted Duque's attention. It's not that simple. Nesario still has a trump card that he hasn't used. Alexstrasza and the others know that too. If there were no external forces involved, under normal circumstances, Nesario would have fallen long ago under the premise that there was not much difference in individual combat power. He wouldn't have to wait for the cataclysm in the future. But at this moment, heavy footsteps came from the stairs of the room behind the terrace. Duque, you're actually watching the show here? There was no need to ask to know that the loud voice belonged to Lothar. It wasn't just Lothar. Duque was a little surprised to find that it was actually Sasha leading Lang, Dalen, the Bronzebeard brothers, Gerben and Kudrin. Below, a large group of guards from various countries were protecting the house impenetrably. Hey, you guys. Duque stood up with a wry smile while looking at Lothar with a slightly reproachful gaze. King Lang took the initiative to speak up. Don't blame Anduin. I know you asked us to take refuge in the basement for our own good. But even the mastermind dares to watch the show here, while we hide in the basement like clowns and shiver. Isn't that a disgrace to the Alliance warriors? Duque blinked. Lang, what you said makes sense. I'm actually speechless. Dalen came up and gently punched Duque's chest with his fist that was as big as a bowl. You're not kind. You actually didn't inform us that Presto is the wing of death. You even asked us to openly offend old man Tyrrhenus for your sake. Judging from Dalen's completely impolite tone, it was obvious that he no longer took the king of the most powerful human nation, Rotterdam, seriously. Magni also came up and patted the back of Duque's waist, causing Duque to grimace. Aren't you afraid that one of us will die because of an accident? Duque angrily retorted. Bullsh asterisk T, you old man. Even Nasario's dragon breath won't be able to kill you. Magni actually agreed. Yes, if Nasario stays on the ground and doesn't run, I'll slay a dragon for you to see. Damn it, you're level 10 in bragging and level 10 in irresponsibility, aren't you? Duque rolled his eyes. However, it doesn't seem appropriate to let the 5 dragon aspects fight above Rotterdam City, Gerben said worriedly. Aurelia laughed. Please, ever since Duque discovered Nasario, this cunning black dragon king has never left Rotterdam. Gerben was discouraged. All right, I just want to know what will become of the alliance. Lothar chimed in. We all want to know. At this moment, everyone looked at Duque. If it were anyone else, they would definitely pee their pants in fear when faced with so many kings. However, Duque was extremely calm. His smile was full of confidence, and his deep black eyes were full of certainty about the future. Under the pressure of a powerful foreign invasion, all countries will naturally unite. However, when the external pressure disappears, the countries will reveal their true colors. They only see the losses of their countries now, but not the dangers in the future. Dangers? Kudrin frowned. Duque's gaze turned to the south, seemingly crossing the boundaries of the continent, and landing on the huge door in the crimson land of death. I wonder if everyone has noticed that the door of darkness cannot be destroyed? All the big shots gasped in unison. Lang said, You mean? The orcs are not extinct. If an evil warlock who is no less powerful than Ghoul, Dan appears on Draenor, where the orcs live, then it is entirely possible for the door of darkness to open again. It's just that I can't predict what will come out the next time it opens. The air suddenly became deathly silent. Duque continued. The alliance must purify itself and become more united. Only then can it truly welcome a new life. Chapter 611. Fate was a wonderful thing. It had been 2.5 years, and Duque had completely forgotten about life on Earth. However, Duque knew very well that without the memory line that extended from the distant Earth to the world of Azeroth, and connected to Duque wouldn't have been able to get to this point. The Second War of the Dark Portal was over. The orcs who had slaughtered humans and become cruel and tyrannical, because of the demon's blood, were destined to withdraw from the stage of history along with the old tribes. It was the same for the alliance. Although the alliance of 11 countries sounded like a great alliance, everything had to be eliminated in order for everything to be sublimated. It was not an easy task to evolve from the Rotterdam Alliance to the Great Alliance of the later generations. On the large balcony, Duque chatted with several kings, who could be considered the absolute core of the alliance in the future. Duque was using his memories that transcended time and space to guide these kings, bit by bit using the method of foresight. None of the kings were fools. They had their own beliefs, their own ideals, and their own requirements and hopes for the future of their race. It was not easy to fool them. The goods that Duque brought out were the best parts of the future alliance's operations. Equality, cooperation, mutual exchange, and the formation of emergency response forces were concepts that transcended time and space. These things even deeply fascinated these monarchs and the assistants and ministers standing behind them. If it weren't for the fact that there were still 5 dragon aspects fighting in the sky, they might really think that it was a salon full of research on the concept of governance. In the sky, the battle between the 5 dragon aspects had come to an end. In the previous battle between the dragon aspects, the lack of a strong vanguard like Alexstrasza gave Nasario an opportunity to chase the 3 dragon aspects who were weaker in melee combat like rabbits. This time, the existence of the Red Dragon Queen made Nasario completely lose the opportunity. Although Alexstrasza was a female dragon, her melee attacks were fierce. Because of the continuous recovery of her body by the power of life, she was the most daring to face Nasario head-on. In the game's standards, she was the strongest main tank, which was also the main tank. She alone attracted almost 70% of Netherio's firepower. Her overwhelming speed and mobility did not belong to Netherio's attack power. Almost every round of attacks, she was able to extract something from the injured black dragon. Even though a lot of her dragon skin and scales had been scratched, as long as Netherio didn't attack the same wound repeatedly, she would automatically recover perfectly in a few minutes. It was not one that looked as weak as paper, but one that had completely replicated the scales of ancient dragons that were impossibly tough to most beings in the world. In a sense, the 5 ancient dragon guardians were all cheating and cheating. Now it all depended on whose cheat was stronger. Alexstrasza was locked onto her health bar. Nosdorm was an accelerator. Malygos had unlimited firepower. Isra was a rogue software that kept popping up when you were playing the game, making it impossible for you to play happily. Then, what was Netherio's cheat? In the past, Netherio had an anti-damage halo, and his body was covered in acid. Anyone who touched him would die. But now, what was Netherio's halo? Duque was not the only one who was curious. The 4 dragon guardians were also nervously speculating about Netherio's backup plan. The once mighty black dragon king was already in a miserable state. The experienced Alexstrasza and the unafraid Nosdorm launched a frenzied attack on his left eye that could not open. The wounds on the left side of his body were the most numerous. From the left dragon's neck to his left thigh, not a single part of his body was intact. The armor on the left half of his body, that was used to hold his body in place, had been torn off, and the lava that erupted from his body was destroying his body. From a human's point of view, Netherio's left arm had almost moved to his scapula. This was because the power that swelled from his body had swelled up on his left chest, causing his dragon body to be severely deformed. No one knew if Netherio's chest would explode in the next moment. Even Alexstrasza, who was not afraid of death, only dared to attack Netherio's left chest with her dragon's tail, and did not dare to pounce on him with her dragon claws. However, the other parts of his body were being attacked by the 4 rogue dragons unscrupulously. Netherio's wings were like a broken kite full of holes. If he had not used a method similar to magic to make himself float in the air, he would have long fallen to the ground. Apart from the left side, which was the worst, his back, neck, and limbs were all injured to varying degrees. Some were magical, but most were physical. The 4 dragon guardians carefully and skillfully depleted his life force. They did not lack courage, but it was not worth it to sacrifice their lives for this traitor dragon. As time passed, the outcome of the battle in midair was finally decided. In terms of strength, Netherio did not have an advantage against 4 of them. The injuries from the previous battle had seriously affected his speed and defense. After suffering a series of heavy blows, the 4 dragon guardians finally saw an opportunity. It's done. Duque's magic message was transmitted to the spiritual sea of the 4 dragon guardians at the same time. It was because of the system prompt. Deathwing's HP has fallen below 20%, entering the beheading stage. 20% HP was a very delicate point. Entering this stage meant that the target was on the verge of death, and many skills that targeted the dying could be launched. Of course, this also meant that the opponent's final counterattack. The 4 dragon guardians suddenly changed their tactics. Alexstrasza, who had been entangled in close combat, suddenly flew backward. She puffed out her chest, and looked like she was about to unleash dragon breath with all her might. However, Nosdorma suddenly pounced forward and entangled Neltharion tightly. Just as Netherio was about to take the long-range attacks of the other 2 dragons and pounce forward to interrupt the red dragon's ultimate move, an accident happened. Isra, who had also been using long-range attacks, suddenly switched to a brand new dream. That dream was of his first mate Sinestra. To be honest, because of the flames and corrosive liquid all over his body, he did not know how many female black dragons he had killed during mating. He had no feelings for his first mate. He could not accept the illusion that deeply stimulated him. Sinestra was actually destroying the dragon egg that belonged to him. No! Netherio, who was crazy about the dragon egg, paused for a moment. The 4 dragon guardians seized the opportunity and pounced forward. Chapter 6:12. Isra and Malygos suddenly engaged in close combat, which was beyond Nasario's expectations. By the time he came back to his senses, Malygos had already bitten the dragon's neck, which was a little lower than the back of his head. At the same time, Malygos' pair of front claws also bit him. Endless magical power rushed into Neltharion's neck from his neck. And near the black dragon's shoulder, Isra was ferociously gnawing at the back of the neck, a pair of claws pressing down on the wings of Deathwing, similarly infusing the power of the dream world at every point of contact. At this time Nozdormu, who was the least afraid of death, also pounced. Anyway, this guy's body was made of sand and metal. As long as the power of time contained in the dragon's body was not lost, this guy would not die. He directly gave Nasario a warm hug, and a big mouth of sand and stone bit towards Nasario's right chest ribs. The place that was bitten directly turned into dust and dissipated. Ow 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 ow. Nasario struggled in vain. In his good right eye, there was only one existence, Alexstrasza, the life-giver who restrained him the most. Unexpectedly, what she spat out was clearly a crimson dragon breath. But visually, it looked like she was spitting out a strange green flame. That was the color of life, the power to awaken the earth and make thousands of flowers bloom. A condescending dragon breath of life avoided Nozdormu's neck by a hair's breadth, and hit Nasario's left chest heavily. The former Earth Guardian let out the loudest wail since the start of the battle. In the next moment his dragon blood, which was almost equivalent to super high-temperature flames, burst out from every wound on his body. Originally, this fatal blow could at least seriously injure the 2 dragon guardians behind him. However, Duque shouted, "Disperse!" at the critical moment. This allowed Isra and Malygos to escape. Nozdormu relied on his thick skin and flesh to dodge a little slower. In the end, he was shocked to find that Nasario's dragon blood had actually consumed a considerable part of his power of time. To him this was his life. Nozdormu suddenly regretted it. Neltharion, who was covered in wounds and spewing dragon blood, plummeted from the sky. He smashed through the clouds like a comet, and crashed into the southern wall of the Rotterdam kingdom. His massive body easily shattered the sturdy wall that even the orc's strongest catapults could not destroy, as if it was a pile of building blocks. The falling black dragon instantly plowed a huge ravine that was more than 100 meters wide and more than a kilometer long on the grass between the southern city wall of Lordaeron and Lake Lordermere. The entire Rotterdam city seemed to be moaning in pain at this moment, and the southern city wall collapsed like dominoes, causing the ground to sink violently. This tremor was like a wave that spread in all directions. The buildings near the city walls let out the most violent explosion sounds before collapsing with a loud bang. This scene was many times more exaggerated than a plane crash. The falling Neltharion continued to advance southward on the wet riverbank like a raging wave. In the face of this terrifying momentum, the big tree that required 2 people to hug was even more fragile than a matchstick. It was easily broken and sent flying. The fallen Neltharion chewed on the mud in embarrassment while shoveling like a bulldozer from the city wall to Lake Lordermere. A huge wooden pier by the lake that could accommodate the largest battleship of the Alliance was directly smashed, and countless pieces of broken wood flew into the air. Neltharion, on the other hand, crashed into the lake. Bang! There was a thunderous sound. Neltharion's fall stirred up waves that were nearly 100 meters high. When the lake calmed down a little, the entire surface of the lake began to boil because of his ultra-high temperature, as if there was an erupting volcano at the bottom of the lake. The 4 dragon aspects looked at each other. The big sister, Alexstrasza, was extremely domineering. Drag him up and continue to kill him. Fighting in deep water had never been a wyvern's specialty. Firstly, this was not a true deep sea. Secondly, so what if the lake was more than 10 meters deep? Was the title of the King of Magic just a bluff? Malygos' eyes widened, and his pair of vertical pupils suddenly turned blue. Countless mysterious magic runes poured down from top to bottom in his water tank-sized pupils. A domineering roar reverberated through the entire sky, causing the ears of everyone in Rotterdam to buzz. I declare, this is a world of ice. It was a spectacle that would be unforgettable to any witness for the rest of their lives. It was a miracle that would be sung by every bard for thousands of years. Originally, there was only a thin layer of crushed ice on the surface of the lake, but when a blue and white shock wave spread all the way to the horizon, the crushed ice turned into thick ice. The unparalleled cold penetrated straight to the bottom of the lake, and in a few breaths, all the water within a radius of several kilometers turned into ice. Explode! It was another thunderous roar from Malygos. Crackle, crackle! The lake that had turned into ice suddenly let out a violent explosion, and then all the ice fragments rose into the air in a way that defied gravity, and quickly dissipated in the terrifying winter wind. No one could believe their eyes. Lake Lordemere, which the people of Rotterdam had seen for thousands of years, was gone. In its place was a huge white pit, and an extremely steep cliff of ice appeared where the horizon should have been. At the bottom of the pit near the original lake, a black dragon that was emitting high heat was moving with difficulty. No, it could already be included in the category of twitching before death. The four cheats, the four dragon aspects, flapped their wings and surrounded him again. East, south, north, and west, all four directions were closely watching Neltharion. It's over. Nesario, your shameless betrayal from 10,000 years ago will finally come to an end today. The Red Dragon Queen made a declaration of victory. For my spouse and my people. Malygos was still furious. You, who have been destroyed in the river of time, will become my trophy. Nasdormu announced proudly. Sleep forever, my brother, Isra said calmly. Duque interrupted. Can you kill him quickly? I'm afraid there will be changes. There can't be any changes. Malygos rudely interrupted Duque's magical transmission. Duque, who was on the balcony of Rotterdam, curled his lips. Then do it. I don't want to fight the same boss 3 times. After blabbering for a while, the four dragon aspects finally made their move. They dismembered Nesario, and immediately realized that something was wrong. The surrounding environment was in a trance. Alexstrasza saw Neltharion come back from the dead and crush her eggs. Nasdormu saw the future bronze dragons coming back to attack him and his descendants. Malygos saw the destruction of the blue dragons once again. The 3 dragon aspects woke up at the same time. Isra, what are you doing? No, it's not me. Chapter 613. Duque, who was watching this scene through the magic eyes, facepalmed. These silly dragons were still blinded by hatred. If it weren't for the fact that he had to vent the anger in his heart, Nesario would have mastered the lying corpse swordsmanship long ago. Although it was reasonable for antagonists to die because they talked too much, from a different perspective, one had to understand that when their grudges that were deeper than the ocean and wider than the sky finally had a chance to be vented, no one would be willing to immediately kill off their opponent. Making a move first, and then pretentiously reciting the eulogy, was because their hatred wasn't deep enough. If you had been thinking about revenge every minute of every day for 10,000 years, you would definitely be crazier than Malygos, and you would be even more reluctant to kill Nesario immediately. When Nesario betrayed them, Malygos had dragged the entire Blue Dragon Legion to fight to the death. In the end, his wife was killed, and a large number of dragon children and grandchildren were wiped out. No one would be able to accept such a thing. Even if Alexstrasza wanted to act quickly, she would be stopped by Malygos. Alright, the one behind it had finally made his move. Enzos, one of the 4 great ancient gods of Azeroth. Of course, it wasn't him personally, but judging from the reactions of the 4 dragon kings, it should be the High Elven Minister, who took the lead in seducing Queen Azhara 10,000 years ago, the future king of nightmares, Savis. Only he could erode the Emerald Dream controlled by Isra, and turn it into the so-called Emerald Nightmare in a short period of time. Just as Savi's attacked through the Emerald Nightmare, directly affecting the three dragon aspects and eroding Isra's Emerald Dream, Nesario, who was lying at the bottom of the lake like a corpse, suddenly moved. Like a spring that had been pressed to the extreme, it bounced back violently. A thick black lightning lit up at the bottom of the lake and shot into the sky. It looked like it was going straight for the southern sky. No. Malagos let out the most mournful roar. It was useless. A new wave of nightmares attacked again. Even if Savi's was hiding somewhere to release this move, the power of the nightmares was actually quite limited. Based on the abilities of the dragon aspects, one more wave of nightmares would at most be ineffective. All in all, it would only take 10 seconds at most. But at this juncture, the most critical 10 seconds were too fatal. It was enough to make Deathwing disappear without a trace. Would he be able to find such a good opportunity to deal with him again? Duque couldn't imagine it. However, Duque was unwilling. Weren't the 4 dragon aspects too useless? I've painstakingly schemed, and even used my transmigration cheat to set up such a perfect trap. Yet you can't even kill Nesario. How am I supposed to continue working with you in the future? Unwilling. Indignant. But so what? Duque's heart was filled with grievance. Aurelia painfully noticed that Duque's fingernails had dug deep into the armrest of the sofa. She knew that even though Duque looked like he was going to watch the show, Duque cared more about Deathwing's life than anyone else. She could clearly feel the faint fear in Duque's heart towards Nesario. Indeed, so what if he had that 1/5 platinum disc for warning? Deathwing's 10,000 years of notoriety was not just for show. If Nesario transformed into a human again and launched a sneak attack on Duque, who could guarantee that the 4 Dragon Kings would be able to support him in time? Even if they could save Duque, what about Duque's friends and family? What about Duque's territory? What about his subjects? Everything in the secular world was like a sand castle in front of this ferocious and unparalleled evil ancient dragon. To be honest, Duque definitely wanted Nesario to die more than anyone else. Aurelia really didn't want to see Duque, who was pretending to be relaxed, immersed in pain and fear. However, what could a mere mortal do? This wasn't something mortals could intervene in. At this moment, Duque suddenly noticed a small black dot above Nesario's forward airspace. It was a griffin. On the griffin, there was a man in golden armor. He was holding the golden Bible in his left hand, and doing something that he had repeated thousands of times. He was praying. His armor was very different from the armor of the Knights of Rotterdam and any other country on the continent. Its right pauldron was a huge golden wing, and its right arm under the pauldron was carrying an incomparably heavy warhammer. The griffin he was riding let out a dissatisfied cry, complaining that he was too heavy. He completed his prayer and smiled at the griffin. "Big guy, after I go down, you can go back on your own. I should be dead for sure." There was no fear or uneasiness about death. There was only devotion to his faith. Along with his farewell words, the griffin seemed to feel the determination of its temporary master. It let out a low cry, as if wanting him to give up on this terrible idea. However, he ignored it. Bright golden light descended from above and enveloped the entire set of heavy white armor with golden edges. Soon, regardless of whether the armor was originally white, blue, or any other color, it all began to glow with golden light. He suddenly disappeared from the back of the griffin. He plummeted. His hammer, his armor, and his light merged into one, forming a dazzling golden comet. The comet was heading in the direction of Nesario's escape route. If there were no accidents, 2 rays of light, one black and one gold, would meet in midair in 3 seconds. Even though he was seriously injured, Nesario still had enough agility to avoid the paladin, who jumped down from the sky to seek death. However, Nesario refused to dodge. That's right. "The 4 Dragon Kings can chase after me, Deathwing. How dare you, a mere human, stop me, the true overlord of the sky?" Nesario did not dodge. Instead, he opened his mouth and bit down. The walls of Rotterdam collapsed. At least 100,000 people in the city witnessed this scene, and almost everyone called out the name of this alliance hero. Uther. This great paladin once again showed the world his unparalleled courage. Not everyone had the courage to jump from a height of 1,000 meters. Not everyone had the courage to face the Deathwing head-on. Not everyone had the courage to face death generously. He dared to because his name was Uther. Without any suspense, the incomparably bright holy light in the eyes of humans was sent flying by Nesario. However, he bought himself 2 seconds. 2 precious seconds. But it was not enough. Aurelia was horrified to find that the person she loved the most had disappeared from her side. No one knew why Duque could teleport behind Uther in an instant. Anyway, under the watchful eyes of the entire city, a huge fist formed by arcane energy suddenly appeared. With an incomparably gorgeous right hook, it went through Nesario's blind spot and punched the black dragon's ugly face. Nesario, go. You. Big. Nesario felt dizzy. When he came back to his senses, the 4 dragon aspects pounced on him again. By the time he came back to his senses, the 4 dragon aspects had pounced on him again. This time, no one could save Nesario. You're tuning in to the Lee May's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.